Mariette, the eldest daughter of the Marquis with fiery curly hair, was deeply saddened. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she begged her father not to marry her to an old man whom she did not love. The younger brother sat next to Mariette, watching what was happening. The father persistently asked his daughter to calm down, while the baby was indignant, not understanding what was happening. The lady, depressed and sad, admitted that she could not stand a single day of marriage to an old man who did not inspire an iota of feeling or respect. A man, the Marquis of Markrate, with long hair and a mustache, tenderly addressed his daughter, asking her not to be upset. He confidently assured her that he would definitely find a way to get out of this situation. Covering his mouth with his hand, Alphonse said quietly that Count Juan had already given a warning, adding a note of alarm and concern to the conversation. Suddenly, a lady with a cane joined them. Her confident steps and presence immediately attracted the attention of everyone gathered. A young and at first glance fragile girl, crossing the threshold with slight excitement, asked in a quiet voice how much more money their family would have to give to the Count. It was Blanche, the second daughter of the Marquis, who had straight blonde hair and eyes as clear and transparent as a dewy morning meadow. The head of the family, immersed in deep thoughts and complete silence, met his child with great feeling and tenderness, as if he was meeting a long-awaited miracle. While Alphonse coughed, Mariette angrily asked if her sister had ever thought that she might have to marry a disgusting count for a measly amount of money. Blanche, looking away slightly and with obvious regret in her voice, said that she did not mean anything like that, and sincerely apologizes for the possible misunderstanding. The man stated that the interest was half of the remaining principal, so it was equal to half of the remaining debt. With the horror of the youngest daughter, it became clear what catastrophic consequences could occur if their family did not pay off the debt by the end of the month. The man, lounging imposingly in a chair with a barely noticeable smile on his lips and a relaxed look, spoke in detail about another way to pay off debts. For example, one could consider selling a mansion. A little girl with large bows on her head, full of anxiety and excitement, with a plea in her voice, began to beg her father not to commit this act, hoping that he would reconsider his decision. The youngest son, barely holding back a strong cough, covered his mouth with his hands, showing with all his appearance that he felt very sick and needed rest or even medical attention. With tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, Mariette despairingly declared that in this way she would never be able to fulfill her dream of becoming the prince's wife, no matter how hard she tried. Sighing wearily, the man said that it was unlikely that even with all their efforts, they could lay claim to the place of the royal couple, especially in their current position. Smiling through her tears, the eldest daughter quietly, but with sincere joy in her voice, said that she would gladly marry him if she had the opportunity. Moreover, last month, a secret wedding took place between the lady and the third heir to the throne. The ceremony took place in the main temple, and only the two of them were present, hiding their happiness from the eyes of the whole world. Mariette was deeply confident that even a person with such a high title would never allow himself to break this oath, because it was given before God himself, and its holiness could not be questioned. This came as a shock to the Marquis, who could not believe the words of his dear daughter and was shaken to the depths of his soul, not imagining how this could have happened. Alphonse was incredibly happy with this news, but at the same time, he could not understand why his little sister decided to hide it from him, leaving him in the dark about such an important event. Moreover, the joyful Mariette, with shining eyes, said that if they have a child, then even the emperor himself will certainly bless their marriage, realizing that this will strengthen the union and bring happiness to their lives. Blanche could not understand her friend's joy, because the third prince already had a bride, and despite this news, the current situation remained extremely difficult and confusing. Feeling dizzy and a wave of anxiety, the girl expressed her fears with deep doubt that His Majesty would hardly give consent to such an unexpected marriage. Mariette suddenly had a brilliant idea, which she immediately rushed to discuss with her family, hoping that her idea would be as meaningful and inspiring for them as it was for her. Slowly, with a growing sense of bitterness, the girl began to reflect on the fact that the most beautiful maiden in the kingdom had been decided to marry off to a fat and gray-haired old man because of debts which seemed a terrible injustice. Pointing her finger at Blanche, the lady suggested, why not marry off her younger sister instead, believing that this might be a more suitable solution and would spare the eldest from an unwanted fate. Suddenly, the baby's face changed beyond recognition, and fear and horror were reflected on it like dark storm clouds eclipsing the bright sunlight on a serene, clear day. Placing her hands on her sister's shoulders, Mariette began to persuade the girl to participate in the deception. They were very similar to each other, and that is why no one noticed the difference when substituting. Thus, Blanche, having dressed in a snow-white wedding dress and becoming the wife of the Count, would have the opportunity immediately after the first wedding night to secretly poison the scoundrel, leaving everything a complete secret. Many despised and hated the vile aristocrat, sincerely believing that his true place was in the next world, where he would suffer a well-deserved and inevitable punishment for his countless atrocities. As a result, Blanche will become a rich widow, possessing not only an impressive fortune, but also living in complete luxury and abundance, surrounded by gold and expensive jewelry, enjoying every moment of her new life. The lady did not really like this idea, and she began to cry, unable to bear the realization that fate could take such an unexpected and tragic direction. The men of the Marquise's family looked intensely and sternly at the lady, clearly expressing their disapproval and condemnation of her actions with their dark and uncompromising gaze. With an empty, detached gaze, Blanche looked into space, while the Marquise, with an expressive intonation, asked for help, begging her to save Mariette, and agreed to deception in order to achieve this goal. A vivid image immediately appeared in my head: the Count revealing his wife's attempts to get rid of him, and then severely punishing him for his betrayal and deceit. Through despair, Blanche said that the relative could very well arrange such an insidious plan herself and destroy her husband using all means to achieve her goals. A loud slap, like a thunderclap, struck the lady's cheek, leaving a painful imprint on her delicate skin and causing a deafening sound that echoed throughout the room. It was Mariette, with an angry gaze fixed on her stupid sister, who from such a force of the blow fell to the floor and dropped her crutch in complete confusion and shock from what was happening. In a cold, contemptuous voice, she called the girl empty and selfish, indicating a clear focus solely on her own interests. Lying on the cold stone floor, Blanche sobbed. A plaintive whimper bursting from the depths of the soul seemed to permeate the space around, filling it with an oppressive feeling of hopeless despair and complete hopeless helplessness. Even the younger brother, who handed the cane to his sister, agreed with his father's words that Mariette would have had a better chance of marrying a prince if she had not been a widow. The boy, smiling sweetly, said that if all their problems with logs were solved, it would make their life much easier and eliminate many current difficulties. Roughly reproaching the lady, the Marquis noted that despite her obvious deformities and disabilities, he always took care of her, and in response, she behaved so vilely and ungratefully that his patience and kindness were undeservedly wasted. However, it was always like this. Even in family portraits, everyone behaved as if Blanche was a flaw or a black sheep among them, standing out with her unusual and unpleasant presence. In the painting, the girl's face was covered in a splash of pink paint, creating the impression that someone had casually applied color, distorting her features and expression, leaving only blurry outlines and unclear outlines. Buried in the pillow, the baby had no choice but to obediently submit to the will of the head of the family, whose decision was final and not subject to discussion. In complete despondency, the little lady realized that if she had not been such a kind and sympathetic soul, she would not have been able to survive in this cruel family where every step was full of trials and difficulties. Loudly and decisively, Blanche declared that she would prefer death than to be associated with a vile aristocrat whose company seemed unbearable and disgusting to her. Mariette hastened to gently reassure the worried father, assuring that her words were just an empty and thoughtful bluff designed to completely mislead her opponents and calm down unnecessary but growing unrest. This merciless phrase left a deep wound in the heart of the lady, whose life was already filled with endless difficulties and suffering, as if adding the final touch to her long list of trials. Turning away from the family and going to the window, Blanche could not hold back the laughter that burst from the woman's lips, like a freed stream under the influence of what she saw and heard. With a sad smile on her lips, she decided to throw in her lot with the Count, as if she was choosing between a heavy burden and an unknown but full of uncertainty path. All relatives expressed their approval and genuine happiness, emphasizing how happy they were for the successful outcome and the significance of this event for the whole family. However, it was at this moment that Alphonse noticed something unusual and disturbing in his sister's behavior, which attracted attention and caused genuine concern. The girl's eyes looked empty and lifeless as she greeted her imaginary husband with an expression of complete concentration, as if she were in her own world of illusions. Without wasting any time to think, Blanche decisively jumped out of the window, rushing downwards, as if her body was driven by an inexorable force. This time, the lady was not exaggerating when talking about her readiness to face death. Bare feet walked on the cold stone floor, feeling how every unevenness and icy touch of the stone penetrated them, causing a persistent feeling of discomfort and constant cold. Blanche, dressed in a white dress, woke up with obvious surprise behind bars, in a dungeon, realizing that she was in a trap that she could not even imagine in her darkest thoughts. Next to her, in a dark corner of the cell, sat a man with black hair dressed in simple work clothes. His head was lowered, and his eyes were focused on the floor as if he were absorbed in deep thought. Cold blue eyes slowly rose, and their gaze piercingly slid around the room, reflecting the anxiety and deep tension of the situation. The chains hanging from the ceiling tightly fettered the man's hands, limiting his freedom, and making every movement difficult as a symbol of an inevitable fate and lost freedom. With surprise and silent delight, the aristocrat stared at the stranger, unable to believe her eyes. The look was filled with a mixture of shock and deep wariness. A bright, mysterious smile appeared on Blanche's face when she recognized this man, because their paths had already crossed before, and memories of the previous meeting suddenly came to life in her mind. The noblewoman woke up in a cozy and soft bed, surrounded by an atmosphere of peace and comfort that so pleasantly warmed her body and soul after a night's sleep, allowing her to slowly return to wakefulness. Looking around her room, the lady realized that she was not in the real world, but in a virtual game where every detailed space and every detail around her was part of a carefully crafted digital world. Looking around in her room, the lady realized that she was not in the real world, but in a virtual game, a part of which the maiden herself had previously taken part in the development. It was an exciting dating simulator in which the main character was a charming girl with snow-white hair like sparkling snow whirlwinds. Pierre was one of the potential love interests in the plot, while Blanche was his younger sister and a minor character who did not have a significant impact on the development of events. Looking at her sore leg, the girl remembered that there was nothing like this in the game she had been playing so enthusiastically, and this thought caused a strange feeling of anxiety and bewilderment in hers. The maid, her hair neatly braided into a bun, entered her mistress's chambers, and bowing her head respectfully asked if everything was all right and if she needed any help. The servant, covering her face with her hand, could not hide her excitement. The woman's eyes expressed deep concern, as if every word coming out of her mouth was permeated with anxiety and fear of impending disaster. It was Fleur, and according to the system, she was deeply upset and disappointed that the fragile mistress recovered so quickly and unexpectedly. Smiling her characteristic sarcastic smile, Blanche ordered the maid to immediately bring her a glass of water, thereby emphasizing her superior position and superiority. The maid was shocked and in complete shock that the mistress, who previously suffered from stuttering, suddenly stopped doing so, as if magically getting rid of her old problem. Almost laughing at the mistress, the servant reminded her that just recently, a priest had come to see them, and after such a visit, Blanche was unlikely to be able to recover, since her condition was now making her disabled, perhaps for the rest of her days. The system notified that earlier, Fleur, violating generally accepted norms, spat into a glass of water without any embarrassment, leaving this disgusting stain on the contents. Throughout her life, the maids, despite the efforts of the mistress, constantly and mercilessly mocked and humiliated her, emphasizing her shortcomings and weaknesses at every opportunity. The lady's hand gripped the container tightly. Her fingers seemed to dig into the material from overwhelming anger and indomitable determination. With each passing moment, rage steadily accumulated inside, as if ready to burst out. The water was suddenly splashed into the maid's face, causing her to scream in complete horror and confusion from the sudden shock, which led to instant confusion and a complete loss of composure. Looking angrily at her mistress, the maid turned to her with obvious bewilderment and anger in her voice, full of rage and misunderstanding. Blanche gave strict orders to Fleur to immediately bring the head butler to tell him something extremely important and urgent. Clear and confident steps were heard along the long corridor, their booming echo reflected repeatedly from the walls in the dead silence, instantly attracting the close attention of everyone nearby and forcing them to listen warily. The man responsible for managing the Marquis's mansion entered the aristocrat's chambers, and addressing her attentively and respectfully, was ready to listen to all orders and instructions. The worker was sincerely glad that the mistress had awakened, but did not fail to note that the woman's mind was apparently still in confusion, hinting at a cruel act towards Fleur. Sitting in her bed, Blanche thoughtfully asked her uncle whether her father remained just as determined in his intention to marry her to the Count. The voice trembled with excitement, and concern flashed in the eyes. Averting his eyes to the side, the butler nodded reservedly in agreement, as if trying to hide his true feelings. His gaze was full of silent understanding. Smiling awkwardly, the servant restrainedly reported that the Marquis, having demonstrated his influence, had arranged it so that instead of his eldest daughter, it was Blanche who would become the Count's wife. In the original storyline, after the tragic death of her sister, Mariette was forced to become the wife of a scorned aristocrat whose treachery and cruelty eclipsed even the darkest expectations. Pleased that Blanche had accepted her fate, the butler asked Fleur to prepare aromatic tea to celebrate the moment with a slight smile. However, the young lady intervened, declaring that there was no longer any need for making tea, since the maid who could do it had already been fired. Shocked to the core, the lady could not believe her ears, unable to understand how she could be deprived of a position that she considered an integral part of her life and status. But then Blanche took her jacket off her shoulder and showed how carelessly the servants treated her. The lady emphasized that no aristocrat's bride should look like this, which was especially unacceptable for her. The man tried to justify his reluctance to cooperate with Mustard, arguing that the dismissal of Fleur could lead to unforeseen complications, which would certainly create additional difficulties. The girl's uncle himself was afraid that this unreasonable girl might tell someone about her unsuccessful attempts to take her own life, which caused him fear and anxiety. The noblewoman recalled that the basement was empty and hinted that it should be used to punish the disobedient maid. The servant could not find peace and continued to ask the mistress many questions, trying to understand the reasons for her cruel behavior towards her friend, which seemed completely unfounded to her. Suddenly, a sharp sound of a reciprocal slap was heard in the air, which was directed directly towards Fleur, and this caused considerable surprise among those present. Without showing any sympathy, the aristocrat stated that for the past 3 years they had not been friends. The woman's words sounded with cold cruelty, leaving everyone confused. With a cheeky grin, the lady asked if the maid really meant that the word friendship actually meant simply unquestioning service and following strict orders. Shocked by the sudden change in her mistress's behavior after a long sleep, Fleur froze in place in horror, unable to understand what could have caused such a sudden change. The male workers of the house grabbed the servants by the arms and, without saying a word, began to slowly and decisively lead them into the dark basement, full of determination to complete the task at hand. The door slammed shut behind me, leaving only the echoes of a loud bang and a deep sense of complete isolation in the air, as if the world around me had disappeared. Sitting on the bed, the girl thought that this game was created specifically for Anastasia, as if all the elements were aimed at satisfying her own needs and interests. It was not worth getting close to the main villain of this game and the main character of the hidden ending, a guy with black hair sitting on the bones of enemies and holding a weapon in his hands. This irresistible but cunning scoundrel was called Riccardo Giotto Digitalis. His name, sounding like a poem, was shrouded in mystery and intrigue, generating both admiration and fear. The photograph showed smiling people joyfully celebrating the birthday of a mutual friend. Their happy faces and warm expressions created an atmosphere of celebration and friendly comfort. In her past life, Blanche was surrounded by love and care. The Virgin had reliable and devoted parents who provided her with a sense of security and stability. The guy was an incredibly sweet person, always ready to support and help out in difficult times. His care and kindness created a feeling of warmth, making him an invaluable friend and partner. Smiling sweetly, the father told his son-in-law that they were no longer expecting their beloved daughter and would not accept a return, thereby emphasizing the final decision that there was no turning back. Friends often scolded the main character for often not picking up the phone and not answering calls on time. They expressed their dissatisfaction and concern, considering such behavior disrespectful and annoying. However, sometime after the release of the long-awaited game, everything changed. Now she walked confidently along the road, talking on the phone with a guy. As soon as a large truck came around the bend, the girl froze like a deer in headlights. Blanche stood in complete stupor, unable to move from her place, from surprise and horror frozen in this tense moment. The phone slipped from my hands and fell to the ground, and the screen cracked, breaking into many small cracks that quickly spread across the rough surface. After her memories returned to her, the lady realized that no one had truly loved her in this life. This realization took the form of a bitter revelation, forcing her to think deeply about the ruthless loneliness. The door opened, and the youngest son of the Marquis family walked in, smiling brightly and greeting his sister. His joyful expression and warm greeting filled the atmosphere of the room with light and comfort. Approaching the relative, he began to inquire about her well-being, sincerely surprised by the sudden cure for her stuttering, which seemed to happen as if by magic. Blanche suddenly remembered that she could heal her leg with the help of a magic ointment, which, as it turned out, has amazing healing properties. Alphonse, leaning towards the bed, irritably and angrily attacked the stupid girl, reproaching her for such a rash act that almost destroyed all their carefully thought-out and strategically verified plans. Suddenly, the lady realized that she could see the boy's status window, which stated that he was 10 years old and described his abilities. At that time, the guy continued to complain that his older brother even had to call a priest. Comparing her status to the boy's, Blanche realized that, due to her high stress levels and low physical condition, her performance was significantly lower in all aspects. While the lady was thinking about her morality, which was indicated by strange squares, Alphonse was indignant, since his sister did not pay attention to him at all and did not listen to the comments. The boy, portraying himself as a sick person, tried to evoke pity from his older sister, hoping that sympathy and compassion would help him achieve what he wanted. Suddenly, the girl came to the realization that the cunning Alphonse, pretending to be sick and causing her pity, was actually trying to manipulate her feelings in order to achieve his goal. If he shows himself to be much weaker than this little lady, all the attention and focus will be directed solely at him. Clenching her bright dress in her fists and sobbing with grief, the girl with a plaintive voice babbled about the injustice of the fact that her favorite toy was given to her brother, leaving her without an object so dear to her heart. Holding his son close, the Marquise justified him, claiming that he was still very young and could not fully understand the consequences of his actions, which helped mitigate the situation. Alphonse grinned meanly as he watched Blanche suffer a derogatory rebuke for his rude behavior. The mocking expression on her face was full of pleasure from the way she blushed with shame and painfully tried to hide her embarrassment. The boy, relying on his most sincere and reverent feelings, persistently continued to call his relative, who, as if spellbound by magic, flew among the clouds, not noticing his plea. Frightened, Alphonse began to walk away when, having received no response other than a restless cough. He felt that his efforts remained without a proper response. The guy was deeply puzzled and embarrassed when his older sister unexpectedly revealed his cunning deception, depriving him of his last hopes of hiding the truth. Blanche, with obvious irritation and without a trace of tolerance, ordered an immediate stop to pretending, and also not to continue to feign deafness, making it clear that fragile patience had reached its limit. When the fragile hand was suddenly grabbed, Alphonse was seriously frightened. Panicked, he began to scream loudly, demanding to be released immediately, as if his whole life was at stake at that moment. Despite the fact that the guy had enough strength to break free, he stubbornly continued to pretend to be helpless until the last moment. This behavior seemed strange, but perhaps it was part of some plan that no one knew about. With tears streaming down his cheeks, Alphonse desperately begged the butler for help, trying to convey the depth of his despair, and explaining that his dear sister, unfortunately, had lost her mind and now urgently needed immediate intervention. The guy, having barely freed himself, immediately began to pretend that his hand was experiencing unbearable pain, carefully trying to convince others of the seriousness of his condition. With a cold sigh, the servant stated that he would have to immediately report what was happening to the master, since the situation required his immediate intervention. Smiling sweetly, Blanche accepted the new turn of events with satisfaction as she was now determined to leave behind the suffering and torment that had tormented her in the past and enjoy life to the fullest. The girl's status appeared next to the mark, and now in the column reflecting her changes, there were significantly more squares symbolizing changes. 3 years ago, when the boy turned 7, the marquis congratulated his son with great joy, expressing sincere pride and pleasure at this significant event. Placing his hands on the boy's shoulders, the aristocrat with a warm smile reminded him that he would soon become a student at a magical academy where new and exciting prospects awaited him. Alphonse could not help but feel internal pressure when the comparison of his youngest son with his eldest was made, causing him a feeling of involuntary competition and uncertainty. The boy sat diligently at the table, surrounded by numerous papers, intently studying them, making notes and notes, completely immersed in his work. Leaning back in his chair and closing his tired eyes, he realized that 13 hours had already passed and looked at his watch in surprise, not believing that he had been doing his work for so long. Soon after this, Alphonse went to bed, and the doctor, who carefully approached him, began to carefully check his well-being to make sure that everything was in order and not to miss any important symptoms. The doctor gave clear instructions that if Alphonse rested thoroughly for a few days, the flu should go away and his physical condition would improve significantly. Unexpectedly, the doctor was interrupted by a patient who, interrupting him with persistence, asked him to tell his relatives about a more serious illness so that they would understand the seriousness of the situation. It was extremely important to him that the illness be so serious and dangerous that it would justify the inability to go to the academy and convince the family of the urgency of the situation. The boy tried to convince the employee that his request was justified, and as it turned out, it was beneficial for the employee himself since the father would pay for all visits. Being greedy for money and trying to use every opportunity to gain profit, the man, without hesitation, immediately agreed to the offer, seeing in this an obvious financial and personal benefit for himself. Alphonse could not believe his luck, not believing that he was able to so easily and quickly achieve such incredible luck that seemed almost fabulous and completely incredible. Currently, the Marquis stood next to his daughter, expressing his deep disappointment and explaining how much he was upset by her action, which did not live up to expectations. Mariette, while calming her younger brother, simultaneously made remarks to her relative, condemning her for false accusations and emphasizing how unlawful and unfair the maiden's accusations were. They all stood next to the bed of the girl who had recently been visited by the priest, unlike the poor boy who had been left out and had not received the same attention and support. With a cold smile, Blanche said that they were lucky to witness such a miracle that they might never see again, and added that this event would undoubtedly be an unforgettable experience for them. The aristocrat demanded that the daughter immediately apologize to her relative, emphasizing that such behavior was absolutely unacceptable and needed urgent correction. Blanche ordered the father to immediately fulfill one of two demands: either bring his brother to the priest right now, or send the body of the bride to the count, emphasizing that delay or refusal was unacceptable. The man's hand touched the girl's cheek, and a loud sound was heard in the room, which echoed throughout the room, attracting the attention of everyone present. When the lady fell silent, the Marquise could not help but be indignant, amazed that someone like her dared to set conditions and make demands on him that he considered completely inappropriate and unacceptable. When Blanche stubbornly declared that she would be dead within 2 months, the aristocrat, upset and insulted by this statement, raised his hand to teach her a lesson and show that such words were an insult. Noticing how her father's hand was trembling, the girl suggested that perhaps their conversation should move faster so as not to waste time on such awkward moments and find a more constructive solution. Instead of striking again, the Marquis lowered his hand, restraining his anger, and seemed to have decided not to continue the conflict, focusing on a more balanced and calm approach to the situation. Instead of continuing the conflict, the man ordered the butler to immediately go for the priest, demanding that he come as soon as possible. Frightened, Alphonse turned away from his sister's comforting embrace, unable to cope with the growing fear and confusion that possessed him at that moment. With a smile, a handsome man with long brown hair introduced himself as Ségolène, who believed in the teachings of the god of medicine and dedicated his life to serving those ideals. Blanche, with sincere gratitude and deep respect, thanked the doctor for being able to restore her voice admiring his outstanding abilities and skill, which truly represent an art. Sigolin protested with deep regret, claiming that all this was destined by the will of God, and that he had previously had no opportunity to cope with such ailments, which, as it turned out, exceeded medical capabilities. The conversation was unexpectedly interrupted by the aristocrat, who urgently called a doctor to check the condition of his youngest son, who was concerned about his health. Before the healing began, the doctor recalled that he was not able to treat chronic diseases, but Blanche defiantly objected that it was he who saved the baby from a serious illness. At this very moment, the men who were in the hall turned to the nice lady sitting next to her and looked at her with respect and interest, as if they did not expect her participation in the conversation or opinion about what was happening. This caused the Marquis himself, who with all his heart sought to cure the sick man, to think, and the nobleman began to reflect on how this event could affect plans and efforts. The Marquis expressed his request to the priest, asking him to examine the boy at least once to ensure his state of health and determine possible further steps for treatment. The healer could not refuse the aristocrat, especially given his persistent request and noble tone of address. Therefore, despite the possible difficulties, he immediately agreed to conduct a thorough examination. All excited, Alphonse walked to the doctor on unsteady legs. His nerves and fear were so strong that every step was difficult for him, and anxiety about his own condition literally constrained his movements. The father carefully sat his son on the sofa, trying to do everything to make his child feel comfortable and safe, and setting up the environment for a calm and attentive examination. Sigolin began to use magic, which frightened the guy even more, and his anxiety increased as the sight of magical actions seemed even more frightening and unusual to him. Unwilling to participate in the healing process, Alphonse rose to his feet, pushing his parent away with vigor in a show of determination and independence. On strong and healthy legs, the boy quickly walked towards the closed doors. Every movement was filled with the desire to overcome obstacles on the way to their goal. The father, deeply shocked by what had happened, remained sitting on the floor, surrounded by the doctor, and discouraged by the suddenness and seriousness of what had happened, feeling completely at a loss. The Marquise, with curiosity and wariness, inquired why the young man had suddenly run away, trying to understand the reasons for such abrupt and inexplicable behavior. The priest himself, confirming the words of the aristocrat, was also amazed at the enormous strength that was inherent in this little child, wondering how such majestic power could be contained in such a fragile body. The pleased lady asked her father with interest why he did not go after his disobedient son, who lied to teach him a lesson, expressing surprise at the inaction and lack of decisive action. Standing up, the man could not believe that he had been listening to lies from his own boy for the past 3 years, feeling deeply shocked and betrayed by the deception that had been hidden for so long behind a facade of trust. Blanche could not hide her mockery. Her face broke into a contemptuous smile, reflecting all the disdain and gloating towards what was happening. Heading to the aristocrat's daughter, he tried to justify himself, but the girl firmly ordered him not to waste time on unnecessary excuses, interrupting his attempts to explain himself and cutting him off from further words. The nobleman was glad that dear Blanche understood her father's words so quickly and easily, noting how insight and understanding of circumstances exceeded expectations. To this, the lady replied with a smile that she was simply unpleasant to listen to someone else's voice, demonstrating her dislike for what was happening with a slight dose of irony. The boy got the worst of it from the strict Marquis, who in his anger spared neither strength nor emotions, expressing his displeasure and stern severity that could not be ignored. The aristocrat herself, who was helped by the new maid, no longer cared about her family, and she completely lost interest in their affairs, focusing solely on her own interests and needs. Before leaving, the maid notified her mistress that she would be going out to get a new change of clothes to provide the necessary updates and get her wardrobe in order. Blanche, comfortably ensconced in bed, was content to be alone, enjoying the peace and solitude that this alone time afforded her. Virgo decided not to miss the moment and opened her inventory, preparing to use all the necessary items and resources that could be needed in the current situation. Looking at her inventory, Blanche noticed a box that was full of tools and materials, which she used to train newbies. When the aristocrat touched the box icon, it magically appeared on her lap, as if by the wave of an invisible hand, surprising with its mystery and instantaneity. The lady decided to open the box, which she expected to contain 4 items designed to help a newbie quickly adapt to the game and begin his journey with confidence. The first item appeared was a bottle of green ointment, which had restorative properties and was intended to improve physical endurance. And then a world map appeared, which not only greatly simplified the process of orientation and navigation for the player, but also became his indispensable companion and faithful assistant in difficult adventures. Next, a free spin coupon was provided, which activated a roulette wheel where you could win a random item, adding an element of surprise. Finally, the game also features a white dragon egg, which hatches into a wise and powerful assistant ready to guide the newcomer and help him understand how this world works. Frustrated, Blanche began to shake the box, but the egg did not fall out, leaving her completely bewildered and disappointed. The lady could not understand why the important item had disappeared. Whether this was due to the fact that she was not the main character, or whether it was because there were as many as 7 years left until the resolution of the plot. Wasting no time, the lady began to apply healing ointment to her legs, hoping that this would help her cope with her current problems and restore strength. Suddenly, a blinding light flashed, capturing everyone's attention, causing Blanche to lose his bearings and plunge into complete confusion, unable to make out what was happening around him. The happy girl watched as her toes, which had previously been numb, began to gradually move, returning sensation and delighting in their recovery. Slowly and carefully, the lady rose from the bed. With every step she tried to take on her own, she tried to make sure that her frail body was ready to move. Suddenly, there was a loud cry from the shocked maid, who watched in disbelief as the lady whom everyone thought was bedridden suddenly stood up and began to walk. Blanche, putting a finger to her lips and showing cold majesty, ordered the servants to remain silent, clearly demonstrating that no noise should disturb the carefully thought-out plan and disturb the ideal silence. The butler entered the room and, expressing restrained concern, turned to the hostess with a question whether the servants had committed any unacceptable acts or actions. Holding the maid's mouth, Blanche replied that despite the accidental incident where the maid stepped on her foot overall, there were no other problems and everything else was fine. When the man left, the girl ordered the worker to be quiet and calm, threatening that if she did not follow the instructions, she would suffer the same fate as Fleur. All trembling with fear and suppressed by horror, the servant quickly and with a heavy heart assured the mistress that she would remain silent and strictly follow all instructions. When the aristocrat gave the order to dress her, the maid immediately rushed to carry out the command, trying not to miss a single detail and acting with maximum speed and accuracy. Mariette sat next to her little brother, anxiously looking at his face, which looked completely emaciated and haggard, which caused her deep anxiety and concern. Alphonse blamed Blanche for all his troubles, whose insidious plans led to the failure of his own plans. Now after this, the father was angry and upset, blaming his son for the failures that had occurred. The girl warned her brother that he should no longer express his thoughts so openly, since their sister was soon going to become a countess, and any careless word could get them into trouble. She could not help but admit that Juan was far from the most pleasant person and showed himself to be a real abomination, but his colossal fortune and wealth made him an extremely influential and important person in society. With a mocking smile, Mariette stated that by marrying the rich, Juan Blanche would finally be able to really help her family, because marriage with such a wealthy man would bring long-awaited financial support and stability. Hugging her brother, the girl asked him to help support her poor sister, hoping that their support and care would help her cope with difficulties and restore lost strength. If this is not done, Blanche may not listen to Mariette, who smiled evilly at the same time, despite hidden concern for the possible consequences. There were only 2 months left before the wedding, and the mansion, washed by the morning rays, sparkled and shimmered as if covered with golden light, which gave it a special charm and created an atmosphere of anticipation. The maids, waking up the little lady, informed her that her older sister was already waiting and advised her to wash herself and put herself in order as quickly as possible so as not to delay the important morning meeting. Waking up, Blanche could not understand what was happening. Her confusion only intensified until she began to become aware of the situation around her. Yawning, the girl barely remembered how yesterday she had activated a free coupon for services, while the servants, with utmost care and attention, helped her get dressed and neatly comb her hair. When midnight came, The girl, with excitement and trepidation, spun the rainbow roulette full of bright colors and tints, hoping to receive the coveted gift from the systems. Despite all her efforts and expectations, Blanche only received a healing potion made by a low-class witch, which was contained in an inconspicuous simple bottle. The joyful maids told the young lady that Mariette was waiting for her for tea in the greenhouse, and also brought her a beautiful new dress with exquisite jewelry. Wearily dropping her head on the pillow, the girl said that she had no desire to go anywhere, which greatly frightened the servants, who did not expect such a refusal and were confused by the unexpected decision. The ladies were not going to give up so easily, and in order to convince the girl, they enthusiastically presented an expensive dress from a famous atelier, as well as pearls given as a gift from Blanche's mother. It was impossible not to notice how old the piece was, as the pearl beads showed numerous scratches, giving it a worn look. The dress that Blanche was now offering had once been purchased by Mariette herself, but she soon abandoned it as soon as she saw another lady in the same outfit. With a grin, the lady asked her maids if they really thought their mistress was so stupid as not to notice their cunning and tricks. Turning away from the servants and settling down on the bed, the girl sarcastically asked to tell Mariette that she was under no circumstances going to wear such expensive and beautiful things. Soon a relative appeared in her sister's chambers, dressed in a beautiful blue dress with bright red curls that effectively emphasized her sophisticated image. With a smile, the lady explained that this dress and jewelry were chosen by maids who do not understand fashion at all, and therefore their choice should not be taken seriously. Blanche could hardly contain her laughter, noting how terrible the taste of her sister's henchmen was, as if they did not know what real fashion and style were. These words angered Mariette, who sternly warned her to be more polite since she truly cared for her and did everything possible for her good. Acting like a real angel, the girl added that she had been taking care of her father's younger children since the death of their mother, emphasizing her sacrifice and constant attention to the family. In a cold and piercing tone, the heroine asked whether the fact that Mariette turned her into a cripple could also be considered a sign of concern, like all the other actions that she tried to pass off as kindness and attention. The girl remained motionless, like a statue, her body frozen in one position, as if spellbound, and her eyes widened in surprise and shock, reflecting deep shock. The aristocrat, with an icy expression on her face, and without the slightest hint of compassion, ordered all the servants to leave the room, immediately demanding that they leave the space right now. As a result, the room was empty, and the girls were left completely alone, surrounded by silence, in which the echo of their own thoughts seemed especially loud. Leaning towards her sister, the noblewoman asked with curiosity and slight irritation what exactly she meant uttering such nonsense, as if her words could reveal some important secret. Mariette tried to put pressure on Blanche, strictly ordering her not to utter such words in front of strangers again. Such words could cause serious harm or create an awkward situation. No longer willing to give in to Mariette's demands and bend under her pressure, Blanche decided to give a decisive rebuff, showing firmness and persistence in her refusal. This character originally did not have a limp, which was only the result of an accident that occurred when the poor girl was thrown off a ledge. It was the older sister who caused this acting like a real villain, after which she fled the scene of the crime, leaving her relative to suffer the consequences. Mariette began to worry, and her cold calm quickly gave way to anxiety when she realized that the situation was rapidly getting out of control and threatened to have serious consequences. With a mocking grin, Blanche said that Mariette was worth nothing more than ordinary trash, and added that she could no longer bear her presence in this place. The little lady resented this treatment, and feeling deeply resentful, became hostile towards her sister. Feelings were filled with anger and distrust. The aristocrat hastened to remind that if Blanche had disappeared from the mansion at the moment, she would have had to become the wife of the vile count, whose intentions and reputation were far from the best. A noblewoman with curly hair sharply ordered to immediately stop talking about this nonsense, recalling that she was her father's favorite daughter and could become the wife of the prince himself. These words almost caused Blanche to laugh, which she could hardly restrain. If the third heir to the throne really intended to marry her, he would have paid a visit long ago and made a formal proposal. Mariette tried to justify her lover by claiming that the man was simply busy with his duties and did not have the opportunity to devote time to her, although this excuse seemed insufficient for all parties. Blanche called her sister a fool, claiming that she had chosen only a real womanizer as her husband, who did not deserve attention and respect. The older lady hastened to answer, reminding that it was the relative who had no opportunity to move, much less escape, which deprived her of freedom of choice and action. Before leaving, Mariette left her sister with orders to begin preparing for the wedding, little by little, assuring her that this moment was just around the corner and that all preparations needed to be started as soon as possible. Thinking about how careless the lady was, Blanche decided that she herself was not going to put up with this marriage, and despite all the circumstances, intended to run away from the marriage in order to avoid this inevitable fate. At this time, a man with an unusual appearance asked the gentleman whether he was really going to poison his bride, as if the question itself was unusually acute and alarming. The aristocrat, picking up a glass of drink, agreed with the statement that if the cripple dies, then the most beautiful woman in the kingdom will become his sweet wife. A servant with an earring and a beard reminded the owner that the elder brother of the Marquis's family agreed to become the count's servant if he agreed to marry a girl with a physical defect. Juan had deep doubts that the spoiled boy could really help him in the smuggling business, since his inexperience and habit of a comfortable life could become a significant obstacle. Having bowed respectfully before the master, the servants hastened to carry out all his instructions, showing complete submission and readiness to follow every order. The man was also interested in what to do with their imprisoned boyfriend who was in prison. He sought to find a solution to deal with this problem so as not to leave it unattended. His name was Ricardo. The boy was covered with abrasions and wounds, which clearly indicated the cruel trials and suffering that he had to endure, which left visible traces of torture on his body. The servant mockingly asked if the owner was going to send money to the guy's father and leave him alive, as if this was the most important question in this situation. The aristocrat laughed, noting that if he paid the full amount, his financial condition would be halved. Such a load would be too much for him, and while the nobleman kept the boy in prison, the father did not have the right to even say a word. As a result, Juan will become the richest man on the continent and will acquire a beautiful wife, which will ensure an outstanding position in society. Night fell, and the house fell into silence, as if shrouded in a soft blanket of darkness, where every detail acquired a new mystical charm under the light of the moon. The Marquis entered his daughter's room and began to talk with dissatisfaction about how disrespectful the maiden had become, lately noting that her behavior had become a real disappointment to him. When asked if the girl wanted to tell her dad something, Blanche shook her head negatively, not wanting to share her thoughts and problems. Moreover, the lady stated that it was the Marquis who should apologize to his own blood, emphasizing that he himself was the culprit of the current misunderstandings and conflicts. For the man, this seemed ridiculous, since the nobleman did not understand how anyone could expect him to apologize for something that he himself considered insignificant or unlawful. The Marquis asked not to blame them for the incident, explaining that the girl herself decided to jump from the balcony, as a result of which she broke both legs and lost the ability to walk, which was a tragic consequence of a rash act. The upset girl admitted that she had long ago realized that to her father, she was nothing more than just a cripple. Such awareness only aggravated the baby's suffering. The aristocrat did not understand why the lady would distort the facts in such a way, playing the victim and eliciting sympathy rather than admitting her role in the current situation. Blanche replied that it was in her blood, as if she could not shake off the innate tendency to manipulate and dramatize, that according to a woman was part of her nature. The lady reminded the relative that it was she who currently bears the burden of all the family's problems, and the responsibility for solving them has become a heavy burden that the girl bears with difficulty. Taking a cup of tea in her hands, Blanche added that despite all her efforts, she would not be able to convince her father about her upcoming marriage, no matter how hard she tried to change his mind or influence the decision. In an effort to bring her father into the open, the noblewoman asked if he could sell at least part of the mansion in order to improve his financial situation and thus help his daughter in a difficult situation. The man, embarrassed, hesitated, could not utter a word, clearly demonstrating by his behavior that he did not know how to answer this uncomfortable question. Blanche already knew the answer. The Marquise had no intention of helping, and her intuitive understanding of this situation only strengthened the feeling of disappointment and hopelessness. With a voice trembling with anger, the girl ordered her relative not to raise his voice at her any more, demanding respect and an end to any attempts to humiliate her daughter. The girl, sweating with anger, declared that she would commit suicide on her wedding day, and before leaving, she would tell her husband that her father was the reason for her action. These words were full of determination and despair, leaving behind a gloomy foreboding. Suddenly, the system alerted Blanche that a poisonous ingredient had been added to the tea, which immediately caused her to feel an acute sense of anxiety and wariness, causing her to heighten her vigilance. The image of his father slowly began to lose its appearance, as if the shadows and light in the room began to distort and blur his face, turning him into a hazy and undefined vision. Blood poured from the girl's mouth, covering her lips and chin, indicating serious internal injuries and imminent danger to life. The man, noticing how his daughter suddenly coughed in a fit, immediately got up from his seat, not hiding his confusion and deep concern, and hurried to her. The Marquis, in panic and despair, called for help, but his cries went unanswered, and there was not a single person around who could come to the rescue at this critical moment. Suddenly, the lady remembered the magic potion that was in her inventory. The little girl hoped that this remedy could help in the current situation. However, in the presence of an aristocrat, it was unsafe to open one's inventory, as this could arouse suspicion and lead to undesirable consequences. Grabbing her parents' clothes, Blanche, with anxiety and despair, asked him to immediately bring a doctor, her voice trembling with excitement and fear for her own condition. The nobleman resolutely rushed in search of a priest who could provide assistance in the current situation, hoping that his intervention could bring relief and salvation. The little lady herself, using her last strength, opened her things and with difficulty took out the potion, trying to press it, hoping that this remedy could ease the suffering and change the course of events. Swallowing quickly, the noblewoman began to drink the potion, trying to absorb it as quickly as possible in the hope that this remedy would help her cope with the disease and relieve her symptoms. Exhausted and losing consciousness, the aristocrat, unable to stand on her feet, fell onto the sofa. Her fragile body trembled, and her breathing became more and more intermittent. A luxurious black carriage slowly drove through the square, shiny wheels shimmering in the sun, and exquisite details and gold decorations gave the appearance of a true symbol of status and grandeur. Inside the carriage sat a handsome young man with fiery red hair, dressed in elegant and carefully selected clothes that emphasized sophisticated style and status. This was Pierre, a relative of Blanche, who was famous as the most handsome man on the continent and a local genius. His charisma and outstanding mental abilities made him an object of admiration and respect among all who had the pleasure of knowing him. As the man stepped out of the carriage, there was a loud cry that sounded like a call to his brother, reflecting the excitement and impatience that his loved ones felt from waiting. At the same moment, the youngest son of the Marquis, without holding back his emotions, hugged the eldest, tightly expressing his joy and relief from their long-awaited meeting. Alphonse sobbed loudly, admitting how much he missed his relative. Large tears were full of sincere despair and relief from their long-awaited meeting. Pierre himself, clearly worried, asked about Blanche's well-being. The man's voice trembled with anxiety and tension, showing how deeply he worried about her condition. Alphonse hesitated, not knowing how to answer the question asked. His face turned pale with embarrassment and anxiety, and he was completely confused, not knowing how to accurately and correctly report his sister's condition. Sitting in the cozy living room next to the Marquis, Pierre, showing deep concern, asked what happened to the girl who was poisoned 10 days ago. The aristocrat himself could not believe that someone could have evil intentions towards such a defenseless little girl. He was shocked and overwhelmed by the idea that someone could have harmed her and could not accept this terrible reality. Pierre hastened to reassure the nobleman, trying to relieve his anxiety and fear, assuring that Blanche had incredible fortitude, and fortitude that would allow her to overcome all trials and certainly survive despite the dangerous condition. Covering his face with his hand, the aristocrat also tried to cope with excitement and uncertainty, hoping that internal fears and doubts would not prevent him from believing in the best and maintaining hope. The boy supported his father, helping him to the room while he complained about his fate. His words were full of despair and indignation. Soon, Mariette joined them, her face lit up with joy at the sight of the return of her older brother. The happiness was indescribable, and she greeted the guy with relief and excitement. The girl said that she was very upset and felt deep fear for her future if Blanche did not recover. The words were full of despair because she realized how much her own happiness depended on her sister's health. When asked what she was talking about, Mariette reminded her relative of the Count, whom she was destined to marry in the worst future. Not understanding his sister's cruelty, Pierre was very worried about Blanche, who seemed to be trying to leave them and go to another world, leaving behind only darkness and doubts. The girl herself stated that Juan was to blame for everything, who desperately sought to get the most beautiful lady in the kingdom as his wife, sparing neither means nor efforts to achieve his goal. These words caused deep upset and significant disappointment in the man, leaving him in a state of complete inner turmoil, an emotional turmoil that was impossible to ignore. The girl became confused when asked whether she was more worried about Blanche or her own well-being, and was unable to immediately find an appropriate answer, reflecting her inner confusion. Pierre himself was well aware that Mariette was only concerned about her own interests and well-being, not paying attention to those around her and their problems. With ridicule, the maiden said that her brother always presented her in an unfavorable and negative light, trying to belittle her merits and exaggerate her shortcomings. Pierre, consumed by deep frustration and inner turmoil, only remained silent, not finding suitable words to respond to the harsh reproaches and inappropriate accusations that continued to come. The girl, with a slight touch of mystery, shared with the boy that Blanche, it turns out, remembers all the events and details that it would seem could be forgotten. After that, she added that her dear brother, at that moment, was her only ally who fully shared her views and experiences and supported her in the most difficult times. After all, at that ill-fated moment, the two of them threw the girl off the cliff, and then, filled with gloating and self-satisfaction, they left laughing and smiling, leaving the baby in complete defenselessness and danger. One day, when Blanche was only 9 years old, the whole family went to a country villa to spend time in solitude and enjoy the tranquility of nature away from the bustle of the city. The older children could not stand the younger one experiencing constant irritation and dissatisfaction with her, which sometimes resulted in minor and major nagging and manifestations of disrespect. It was extremely unpleasant for them to have a sister with speech problems, which further aggravated their dislike for her and caused constant irritation, creating constant conflicts and discontent in the family. Afraid and trembling with fear, the girl found herself on the edge of a cliff. Her heart was beating wildly, and her gaze was fixed on the abyss that opened before her. Mariette, with a smile on her face, said that if Blanche remains sitting on the cliff until tomorrow, then they will play together as soon as a new day comes. The boy promised to bring sweets after the meal to treat Blanche and brighten up the baby's anticipation despite the difficult situation. The girl had no choice but to humbly agree, accepting her difficult fate and trying to find solace in the promises that were given to her. After this, the older children left, leaving the girl alone without any consolation or support, immersed in her loneliness and fear. They weren't going to keep their promises. Instead, the older children planned to take their sister's food and have fun without her enjoying the freedom from her presence. Blanche began only 3 days after the disappearance. Ultimately, the lady was found in the rain, lying on the grass, weak and exhausted, but still alive. This is how the third child of the Marquis's family became lame. The girl lay unconscious on the pillow. Her condition left many questions and worries. But suddenly, as if by magic, bright green eyes opened, emitting an incredible combination of surprise and faint hope, despite the previous state of unconsciousness. Rising from the bed, the aristocrat grabbed her head as if trying to cope with a headache or a difficult memory. His face was distorted with pain and confusion. Getting out of bed, the little girl slowly walked towards the window. Although her steps were uncertain and her gaze was directed at the world behind the glass, in anticipation of consolation or new impressions, she was convinced that it was Juan who had given the order to poison her. And this thought haunted her, making her doubt the intentions of those around her and her own safety. The lady opened the inventory to check its contents, and her gaze ran over items that could be both useful and potentially dangerous in the upcoming events. Now she had to reconsider her previous escape plan, and Blanche chose a world map to carefully think through a new route and prepare for the next stage. Suddenly, as if by magic, a sheet of paper materialized out of nowhere in front of the little girl, as if they had created magical powers, adding something amazing to the surrounding atmosphere. The lady made a bold and decisive decision to leave the majestic kingdom of Lupine, seeking to free herself from the strict control of her father, and begin a new life filled with freedom and opportunities for her own happiness. Blanche was looking for a place where it would be possible to remain unnoticed, where someone else's identity would be difficult to reveal, and where it would be easier for a woman to find work. The card instantly disappeared from the woman's hands, as if dissolving into thin air. And after this, there was a loud echoing sound that increased the tension of the moment. Not far away, as if out of nowhere, the elder brother appeared. His appearance was imbued with deep concern. A look full of anxiety spoke of how much he worried about his younger sister. The baby, as if nothing had happened, stood calmly next to the window, as if all the surrounding chaos did not concern her, and she was in her own unperturbed world. The man, realizing the situation, immediately realized that perhaps the baby was going to jump out of the window again. Such a thought was full of anxiety and concern, because Pierre was afraid that the previous intention might be repeated. The guy, moving quickly towards the girl, tried to stop her, but suddenly tripped and fell, losing his balance and barely able to stay on his feet. The Marquise's son knelt down full of remorse, and with sincere regret, asked forgiveness for the mistake he had made in the past, realizing the gravity of his actions. Blanche greeted her old relative with a soft smile, expressing her sincere joy that he had finally deigned to return home after a long absence. The girl, confidently walking on her own feet and not relying on a crutch, came closer to him, demonstrating her independence and joy from the meeting. With a smile on her lips, the little girl extended her hand to the boy, and with sincere delight in her voice, said that she wanted to take a good look at her brother in order to enjoy the long-awaited meeting. Pierre was completely shocked to discover that the baby could move independently. The surprise was so great that he could hardly believe his eyes, seeing how the lady moved on her own feet without any assistance. Blanche explained that her brother had previously broken her legs. However, now thanks to healing, the girl was able to learn to walk again, regaining her independence and confidence in her movements. Feeling deep guilt for his past actions, Pierre turned away, sincerely asking for forgiveness again, his voice trembling with remorse, and the man tried his best to make up for his mistake. The little girl sat down next to the guy, trying to calm him down. With warmth and encouragement, the little lady said that now Juan will be satisfied and happy. With empty eyes, the girl said that now she was in no way inferior to Mariette and would become a good wife to an aristocrat. These words were full of determination, despite the lifeless look reflecting the desire to take his place. After this, the lady added that if the good brother could have asked the princess, then she would not have been sent to be torn to pieces by the scoundrel. There was bitterness in the voice, reflecting disappointment from the current circumstances and injustice. Placing her hand on the tall man's shoulder, Blanche quietly said that she no longer blamed him for what happened, but she wanted to ask him about something important. Seizing these words as if they were his last hope, Pierre exclaimed, asking what exactly his little sister wanted. There was impatience and a sincere willingness to help in anticipation of a clear answer to a question that was important to him. The truth was that in 7 years, the world was going to change dramatically. Monsters were expected to appear, which would be ruthless and merciless, disrupting the previous order and creating a threat to all living things. Soon, the appearance of Saint Anastasia was expected, who was going to bring hope and salvation to all residents, eradicating disasters and evil. The lady's mission was aimed at restoring peace and protecting people from the impending threat. However, during the struggle, many minor characters were killed, among whom was Blanche. Such a loss was a heartbreaking loss for the families. As a result, there was only one city left on the map suitable for escape: Digitalis, which occupied a high place on the list of places where one could find peace among chaos and destruction. Ricardo, who was the main opponent of the heroine and the source of many disasters, lived in this city. Digitalis, although remaining a last resort, also turned out to be a villain's lair. The lady asked her brother to take her to the treasury, expressing a desire to examine it. There was urgency and hidden hope in the voice. It was in the treasury that the white snake bracelet was located, which had the unique property of doubling the experience gained. This most valuable artifact was intended for the main character, and Pierre planned to give it as a gift in the future. Wiping tears from her cheeks, Blanche remembered how they visited the treasury together when she was still slow and could not join them. Those times filled my heart with nostalgia and warm memories. Sobbing, the girl turned to the man, talking about her deep desire to visit the treasury at least once before getting married. The words were full of passionate regret and nostalgia. Pierre immediately grabbed his sister's hands full of determination and care, and promised that tomorrow he would go to his father and try to find the key to the treasury. The lady rushed to hug the guy, her voice trembling with gratitude as she uttered words of gratitude. The baby hugged him tightly, unable to hide her emotions, expressing all her gratitude and joy. Immediately wiping away her false tears, the girl admitted with sincerity in her voice that Pierre was the only one in the family whom the little girl could completely trust. A golden key sparkling with jewels was in her hand, like a symbol of importance and value. The exquisite shine emphasized how much this thing meant for the fulfillment of a wish and the opening of a treasury. The Marquis gave the key to the treasury to his child, symbolizing not only access to jewelry, but also special responsibility. It became an important part of the heritage passed down from generation to generation. Sitting in her wheelchair, Blanche sincerely thanked her father, her voice filled with deep gratitude, and her eyes shining with sincere gratitude, reflecting all the warmth and appreciation for his support. The man interrupted her, saying with a serious expression on his face that it was he who should thank God for the fact that the youngest daughter was able to come to her senses and recover. The key was carefully held out into the girl's frail hands, which were stretched forward as if reaching for this precious symbol of hope and change. Grabbing the arms of the chair, the father decisively decided to help Blanche. Such support and care were obvious, and he was ready to do everything possible to help his daughter overcome difficulties. As they drove past her older brother, the little girl put her finger to her lips, asking him to remain silent about the fact that she could now walk on her own. Yesterday, Pierre made a solemn promise to protect the secrets of his sister, swearing that he would keep them in the strictest secrecy, despite all possible trials and difficulties. The family was soon joined by an older girl who greeted them with a warm smile. Mariette was dressed in a new dress, with her hair neatly tied back. The girl hurried to meet her father, her face expressing concern and anxiety. The father excitedly, and with obvious excitement in his voice, asked what happened, sincerely wanting to know the reasons for the unnecessary anxiety. After this, the noblewoman approached her sister, and with obvious excitement in her voice, she said that her impatience about the visit to the treasury had reached its peak. Under the attentive gaze of her family and friends, with some excitement, Blanche carefully inserted the key into the door lock, as if this moment was full of special meaning and symbolism for everyone present. The door slowly opened, and the Marquis' family, filled with excitement and anticipation, crossed the threshold with grace and respect as they entered. Mariette could not help but notice how considerably the treasury had emptied since their last visit. The sight of the jewelry arranged on the shelves, which had previously shone with wealth, now caused deep sadness in my father. In the corner of the room stood an elegant box, from which peeked out a bracelet in the shape of a snake. This decoration lay like a precious secret, containing mysterious beauty and ancient history. Approaching her father and looking at him curiously, Blanche spoke with caution, asking a question about the mysterious object that was inside. Smiling with aristocratic grace, the father declared that it was a thing referring to a white snake. This tone was full of pride and mystery, as if this object was not just decoration, but a real symbol with history. It turned out that this jewel once belonged to an aristocrat who was once the princess of a mysterious and magnificent desert kingdom. Blanche asked her relative to try the item on at least once to make sure it fit perfectly and looked as intended. The jewelry looked exceptionally elegant on the lady's thin and fragile wrist, emphasizing sophisticated grace and sophisticated style. The lady stared in surprise at her note, which stated that the jewelry not only emphasized her elegance, but also protected her from curses and poison, adding an additional layer of mystical security. While the aristocrat carefully examined the bracelet, her elder sister watched her closely, clearly experiencing mixed feelings of curiosity and wariness. Loudly and decisively, Mariette exclaimed that she also wanted to try on this jewelry, without hiding her desire to be the center of attention and enjoy the moment. But Blanche only pulled her hand back, saying that a relative had already tried on this jewelry in childhood, and now she herself wanted to enjoy this wonderful moment. The men also sided with the younger family member, emphasizing that the day belonged only to her, and expressed their support for the lame lady. As if nothing had happened, the little girl turned to her father with a calm expression on her face, asking him with interest about the engraving that hung strangely on the wall, demonstrating genuine curiosity. Lost in thought, the man did not know where to start his story and was internally tormented in search of an appropriate way to start the story so that it would sound correct and attractive. Blanche herself decided to take advantage of the moment when the Marquise was distracted and act decisively to achieve her goal without missing a precious chance. Right before Mariette's eyes, the aristocrat, without hiding her intentions, deftly hid the jewelry in the folds of her clothes, demonstrating an amazing ability to hide her secret plans. The elder sister was deeply indignant and, unable to resist, decided to immediately tell her father about all the events that had happened, considering it her duty. However, the Marquis only waved his daughter away, not understanding what was happening to her and not paying due attention to her worries and indignations. Immediately changing the expression of irritation to mercy, Mariette made a naive and kind face, assuring that she was just imagining things in order to smooth out the awkwardness and calm the situation. The aristocrat continued to speak enthusiastically about the preserved image of their ancestors, sharing with keen interest the history associated with this precious artifact. Meanwhile, Mariette developed an elaborate plan to expose Blanche, who had secretly stolen their family's ancient bracelet that had been passed down to each new generation. When some time passed, the Marquise could not believe that the bracelet with the snake had disappeared and continued to be tormented by doubts, not understanding how this could happen. Sitting surrounded by his family, the man could not understand how this could happen because it was a valuable heirloom that should have been kept in absolute safety. Soon intervened and suggested starting a search for the missing jewelry in Blanche's room, considering this a logical step in solving the mystery of the disappearance of the bracelet. Puzzled, the nobleman asked what exactly the eldest daughter was talking about, trying to understand her words and understand whether they could have anything to do with what happened. Immediately, the young lady was accused of having stolen the family jewel, and the whole room was plunged into tense anticipation of confirmation or denial. The father could not believe that Mariette was trying to blame her younger sister, while the maiden herself insisted that they immediately search the little girl's room for the missing item. The Marquis, without wasting a minute, decisively ordered the butler to immediately conduct a thorough search of all rooms of the house in order to restore order. Soon the bracelet was found and carefully placed on a soft red pillow, giving the event a complete look and returning the jewel to its rightful place. The aristocrat himself, clutching his head, could not understand how this could have happened and was completely perplexed trying to comprehend what had happened. Mariette mockingly and self-confidently claimed that she had been convinced from the very beginning that her sister was being deceived and knew about the secret plan despite all her attempts to hide the truth. But then the servants intervened in the conversation, interrupting the conversation and bringing in new details that could change the course of events and shed light on what was happening. Bowing to the master, he announced that the decoration had been found in Mariette's room, thereby causing surprise and growing tension in the room. There was a surprised silence in the room. No one dared to utter a word. Everyone was lost in their thoughts, trying to comprehend and digest the unexpected incident that shocked them. The eldest lady began to actively deny all the accusations, calling them nonsense and ridiculous inventions, thus trying to protect her dignity and justify herself to everyone. She began to claim that she had not taken anything from the treasury, insisting on her complete innocence and expressing deep bewilderment at the words that arose. But at this moment, the servant again confirmed that the bracelet was found in her dressing table, adding new evidence to the unfolding case and strengthening suspicions. Approaching her sister, she asked if it was the work of Blanche, trying to find out who was really behind the disappearance of the jewelry and decide how best to deal with the current situation. Leaning towards her sister with an expression full of anger and contempt, Mariette decisively blamed her for all the troubles that had happened, saying that it was the younger relative who turned out to be the real fraudster who set her up. The Marquis took the side of the youngest daughter, firmly ordering the eldest to immediately apologize for her unfounded accusations and interference, thereby restoring justice. Mariette fell silent, unable to find words in response to her father's strict order. Her face was full of confusion, while the maiden stood in complete silence, realizing that any words cannot justify actions. Crying, she desperately told her parent that it was the pure truth, trying to convince of her innocence and convey that her accusations were based on real facts and not on fiction. Blanche, clutching her head and feigning pain, said that she would like to go to her chambers to rest, thus trying to avoid further investigation and divert attention from her role in what happened. Pierre, with true gentlemanly conduct, offered his assistance in escorting her to her chambers. Kindness and consideration were evident, and he readily demonstrated courtesy, striving to ensure the comfort and safety of his sister. The girl lay in bed on soft pillows and a cozy blanket, immersed in darkness and silence, trying to find peace and solitude after a busy day. The man himself sat nearby, deep in thought. The game system confirmed his suspicions that Blanche was involved in deception, increasing his internal discontent and doubts. Looking at the gameplay notification on the screen, the little girl asked her brother a question, trying to understand how to proceed and what steps to take to continue the game. Quietly, with expressive embarrassment, she confessed her guilt to her relative, explaining that she was the one to blame, and told in detail how her sister got the bracelet, thereby revealing all the details of her action. Puzzled, the man asked why Blanche did this, trying to understand the motives for her actions and understand what prompted her to take such a step. The girl herself explained that before leaving the house, she wanted to cool her sister's ardor, hoping to calm her down for a while and perhaps make her think about her actions. The baby admitted that she was not at all going to walk down the aisle instead of Mariette, as it might seem, but had completely different plans that were not related to such an important step as marriage. The man tried to convince his sister that if Juan remained dissatisfied, it could lead to serious consequences for their entire family, putting them in distress and ruining their reputation. Blanche herself tried to explain that she was not poisoned by accident, but because the Count only needed Mariette, and she was at the center of his plans. Continuing to smile, the lady turned to her brother with a question whether the youngest daughter, in addition to having to get married, also had to become a victim and die for the eldest. The aristocrat fell to his knees, screaming in despair that this should never have happened, deeply afraid of losing his dear sister and not knowing how to cope with this tragic turn of events. The man who survived that terrible day from the past prayed to God every day for Blanche's recovery, sincerely hoping that her suffering would soon end and she could return to normal life. Having risen to her feet, the girl decisively ordered her brother to finally come to his senses and stop allowing grief and fear to take over him, calling on him to show perseverance and courage. Coldly and confidently, the little girl stated that no god saved the little girl, and that it was she who helped herself overcoming difficulties and finding ways to cope with the situation. Tears appeared in the guy's eyes when he realized how much effort and suffering had been put into her own salvation, and how difficult it was to admit that it was strength and determination that played the key role. Taking her brother's face in her hands, Blanche sternly ordered him to seek forgiveness, not from God, but from his own sister, reminding him of the importance of redemption in the family and mutual support. The lady asked to dedicate your attention and care only to her, at least once, emphasizing how important it was for her to feel special and loved, even if it was only for a short moment. Mariette was furious, aware that she was being punished for something she had not done, and feeling a deep sense of injustice for everything that had happened to her, when suddenly the girl was distracted by a voice that came from behind, interrupting her thoughts and drawing her attention to the unexpected source of the sound. It was a maid who wanted to tell her mistress something important, drawing attention to urgent information or a matter that required immediate attention. The shocked Mariette demanded an explanation from the maid, what she meant when she said that Blanche knew how to walk, not believing her ears, and trying to understand how this could be. The maid said she saw with her own eyes how the younger mistress walked without crutches, shocking with her unexpected confession and raising new questions about Blanche's health. In exchange for information, the servants asked for Fleur to be pulled out of the basement, fearing that she might have died, and urgently demanding that she be released immediately. The mistress realized that in this situation, it was most likely Blanche who had planted the bracelet, which put the whole incident in a new light and confirmed all suspicions. Turning away from the servants, the girl decided to immediately meet with her father to discuss the current situation and find out all the details of what was happening, trying to gain clarity and understanding. The Marquis, as one would expect, did not believe his daughter, resolutely declaring that this was nonsense and refusing to take the words seriously until he received convincing evidence. Mariette persistently tried to convince her father to go to Blanche's room to check if there was really anything suspicious there and to find out what was really going on. But then came the unexpected news that Blanche and Pierre had left the mansion together, causing further surprise and raising additional questions about their disappearance and plans. Afterwards, after thinking about what was happening, Marriott asked if the white snake bracelet was still there, fearing that its disappearance might be related to recent events and information leaks. Suddenly, the butler burst into the office with urgent news, interrupting the conversation and drawing everyone's attention to the urgent message that the snake relic was missing. The carriage raced swiftly along the road, while the horses were driven by the Marquise's son, demonstrating skill and determination in the face of urgent need. A pursuit began for the escaped children. The aristocrat, mounting his horse, set off at full speed, in pursuit, relying on his speed and skill to catch up with them. Little by little, they approached the transport, which was under Pierre's control, each step bringing them closer to the fugitives. The man, radiating icy calm, sternly ordered his son to stop the carriage immediately, not tolerating any delays, and demanding from him complete precision and speed in carrying out this order. Raising the pistol menacingly towards the night sky, the nobleman fired with a decisive gesture, his shot resounding loudly in the silence, breaking the darkness of the night and filling the surrounding space with a tense echo. The horses, succumbing to panic, rebelled abruptly, rising on their hind legs and emitting menacing neighs. Their movements were full of chaos and wild energy, creating the impression of complete disorder. The carriage began to gradually slow down its movement, becoming more and more sluggish and indecisive, as if under the influence of an unknown force. Soon the transport overturned, breaking the calm of the night with a dull crash and plunging everything around into chaos and confusion. Breaking the silence and creating an atmosphere of disorder, Pierre fell to the ground and hit a tree with a dull crash, which unexpectedly appeared in his path, leaving painful marks and considerable pain on the male body. The Marquise dismounted from his horse, worried about the health of his son, who at that time was in a dangerous situation. Anxiety showed on his face as the aristocrat hurried to him, wanting to help and comfort him. The worker of the nobleman's house, who took care of the young man, reported that he was fine. He just temporarily lost consciousness, which caused everyone some concern, but it did not have any serious consequences. Suddenly, the Marquis, overcome with great anxiety, remembered his daughter. In an anxious impulse, he immediately rushed to find out what had happened to her and in what condition the lady was now. The servants approached the carriage doors with the intention of opening them, paying attention to every gesture in order to carefully pull out the master's daughter from inside and provide her with a comfortable exit. There sat a girl inside, with long brown hair that fell over her shoulders, creating a subtle contrast with the exquisite outfit and attracting attention with its soft, sparkling texture. The worker informed the gentleman that the lady was also unconscious, adding that such a condition was a matter of serious concern, and the necessary measures were already being taken to provide assistance. Crouching next to his daughter, the Marquis whispered in despair that she should not die, squeezing her hand and relying on the last hope that he could find in this painful moment. He was worried that their family would not be able to pay off their debt to the Earl without the younger lady. Her health was critical to their financial situation. However, unexpectedly, instead of Blanche, another person appeared in front of them who only wore a wig with red hair, exactly the same as that of the Marquis' daughter, creating confusion complete with illusion. The aristocrat could not understand how this could happen, being completely bewildered by the fact that a complete stranger appeared in front of him instead of his daughter, which only added to the unanswerable questions. The events took place in the nobleman's mansion 3 hours ago, under the cover of darkness, when the dark twilight hid the details of what happened, and only rare flashes of light could clarify the mysterious atmosphere of the incident. The father of the family himself was convinced that his daughter was going to go to the port where she could board a ship and leave, seeking to escape the consequences and start a new life away from home. The aristocrat ordered his assistants to immediately follow the trail of the fugitive to find and bring her back, realizing the importance of preserving the family and eliminating debts. The curious townspeople gathered together and began discussing possible escape scenarios, constantly wondering what would happen next, and gossiping among themselves about how events might develop. One of the maids stood out from the rest, not only because of her refined manner of behavior, but also because she was at a distance from the others. Quietly, when no one could notice her, she carefully walked out into the street, trying not to attract unnecessary attention and maintaining her caution in every movement. It was Blanche who, with remarkable ingenuity and dexterity, managed to sneak out of the house skillfully, using her abilities and knowledge in order to leave no trace and not be noticed. Pierre, finally recovering from the sudden and shocking shock, approached his father with visible concern and, relying on the seriousness of the situation, reported that his sister had run away, leaving them behind. Smiling, the man said that now the girl will be able to enjoy life as she deserves, and this desire for freedom will only contribute to her happiness. A month passed, and the apple once eaten was thrown to the floor. It left behind only remnants and a minor reminder of the time that had passed. Blanche continuously ate one fruit after another, thereby gradually increasing her level and improving her condition. Every piece brought me closer to new strength and possibilities. The joyful lady, having set foot on the ground, felt deep satisfaction and joy, because she had finally reached the place that she had long dreamed of and was eagerly striving for. The city of Digitalius, meeting her with its empty streets covered in dirt and poverty, struck her with its sharp contrast with what the young noblewoman expected to see. Satisfied with her high status, Blanche decided it was time to visit Ricardo to demonstrate her superiority. Putting an elegant hood on her head, the lady confidently walked towards the door, near which hung an old shabby sign as if preserving the memory of bygone times. Covering her nose from the stench, Blanche noted that in the original, the city, which was famous for its filth and vice, was not so terrible than the one that opened right now in front of her. She speculated that this might be due to the fact that a secret market specializing in selling mysterious dungeon products had not yet been created. Suddenly, the aristocrat felt someone's hand casually and confidently lay on her shoulder, and this touch suddenly interrupted her thoughts, making her heart beat faster. This man turned out to be an old and ugly man who clearly did not have good intentions. The ominous aura and gloomy presence created an atmosphere of anxiety and discomfort. Blanche, unexpectedly grabbing the man's hand, surprised him with her determination and courage, which was an unexpected turn in their meeting. After that, she sharply twisted his wrist, and pressing his head against the wall, demonstrated her strength and complete control over the situation, making him realize his helplessness. Rudely, and with some contempt, the aristocrat confirmed that his words were true. Blanche had indeed never before visited this abandoned and gloomy area in question. After that, with a sweet and calm smile, she added that she could use the help of a guide to navigate this unfamiliar and confusing area. The lady glanced at the man's icon, on which his name was written in large letters. Jack. His status as street trash was prominently written next to his name. Not wanting to die so easily, the man began to beg for forgiveness. However, Blanche was not going to let her new acquaintance go until he answered all the questions. A sweet girl full of curiosity and anxiety turned to the peasant with a question whether he knew where Ricardo, the son of the famous Giotto family, was now. At that moment, the tramp shouted loudly to the entire hall, attracting the attention of everyone present, and anxiously announced that someone was looking for the eldest son of the boss himself, which caused a wave of whispers and wariness among those gathered. An adult man in an elegant suit and glasses, carefully examining those present, asked who the mysterious stranger was who had suddenly appeared in their area. The aristocrat declared with dignity that she would like to become part of their respected family. She expressed her sincere desire to contribute to their lives and become an integral part of their respected circle. The man looked with doubt and wariness at the strange maiden who suddenly appeared, and who could be none other than the henchman of the vile count. With a single snap of the bandits' fingers, their weapons were immediately aimed at the little girl who stood in front of them. The tension in the air became almost palpable, and an ominous silence suddenly enveloped the rooms. Blanche noticed that the Giotto family showed clear hostility towards her. Cold glances and wariness clearly indicated mistrust and hidden hostility. The guy in glasses, with a serious and concentrated expression on his face, asked the lady to let Jack go, emphasizing the importance of resolving the situation peacefully and avoiding further conflicts. Disgustingly pushing away the guy who was the first to approach her, Blanche demonstrated complete contempt and dissatisfaction. The gesture was full of pride and confidence. The girl raised her hands up and said with sincere regret that if she had known that this person was part of their family, she would have treated him completely differently, showing more respect and understanding. The leader in this room noticed the bravery and courage of the stranger, but despite her courage, he emphasized that they do not accept women into their circle. Deciding to demonstrate the full extent of her strength, The little lady confidently and effortlessly broke the table by hitting it with her fist. After this, Blanche, with a graceful smile on her lips, curiously inquired about the reason why she was not allowed to become part of the Giotto family, which caused her slight bewilderment. Nodding understandingly in agreement, the man, radiating confidence and determination, ordered the strong and decisive lady to follow him, thereby demonstrating his calmness and authority in this situation. The mansion was truly enormous. Its scale and architectural sophistication were astounding, occupying a vast area and creating a sense of grandeur that was impossible to miss. Looking around, the little girl was surprised that the house did not seem as big to her as it would be in 7 years, when its grandeur and scale would increase significantly. The stranger, comfortably seated in his chair, suddenly attracted attention by loudly and emphatically announcing that the lady had expressed a desire to meet his son. There sat an attractive man with dazzling blonde hair and bright blue eyes, dressed in luxurious clothes that exuded sophisticated style and elegance. The girl, noticing the status, quickly realized that sitting in front of her was Riccardo's father, named Ilio Giotto, a man with a high reputation and respect in society. A sad fate awaited this man. 3 years later, when Riccardo turned 18, he himself would deal a fatal blow to his father, using a sword which foreshadowed a tragic event in their future. And already at the age of 22, this attractive young man intended to take the post of boss, which indicated ambitious plans and a desire for high status. And at the age of 30, having become a villain, he intended to carry out his dark plan, aimed at destroying half the continent, which promised devastating consequences. If Blanche can get close to Riccardo, she will not have to worry about her safety in the midst of war, since her alliance with him will provide protection and support in difficult times. In this way, the girl will have the opportunity to truly enjoy every moment of life, have fun with all her heart, and have feasts without any worries, immersing herself in the atmosphere of a peaceful existence. And after that, the aristocrat planned to frame the man and go over to Anastasia's side, which would allow her to strengthen her position and achieve new profitable goals. As a result, Blanche will lead a life of wealth and luxury, enjoying all the privileges and pleasures it has to offer, and immersing herself in a world of comfort and selfless pleasure. Rising from his seat, Giotto carefully and warmly took the beautiful lady by the fragile hand. His gesture was filled with sincere attention and deep respect. Ilio could not help but notice that only noble ladies had such refined and fragile palms, whose hands were without a single callus, testifying to a life of comfort and without unnecessary difficulties. Grabbing Giotto by the hand, the girl reminded him that her desire was not to meet him, but Riccardo, thereby emphasizing her desire to meet a more important person. The leader of the bandits was amazed at the strength and confidence emanating from this small lady, surprised at how the small figure hid such significant inner strength and determination. Ilio, smiling, said that he could not allow just anyone to meet his child, emphasizing the importance of maintaining certain standards and safety in such meetings. However, Blanche still had the chance to become part of the Giotto family. The man with glasses, noticing what was happening quickly, went to the gentleman to help solve the problem. However, before that, Giotto added that the lady must undergo tests to prove her willingness to become part of the bandit family and earn their trust and respect. Blanche asked if she would indeed have the opportunity to meet with Riccardo, showing genuine concern and a desire to make sure her request was granted. Having received the consent of the interlocutor, the girl stated that she would do everything possible to fulfill her part of the agreement, demonstrating determination and willingness to make every effort to achieve the goal. Night fell, and the estate fell into silence, shrouded in mystical tranquility, where only faint light from the windows and soft shadows reminded of life inside. A young guy with blonde hair carefully watched the arrival of the carriage, his gaze focused and full of anticipation as the luxurious vehicle slowly entered the estate. Blanche emerged from the carriage, dressed in a long red dress that emphasized elegance and grace. The lady was accompanied by a man wearing glasses, which added seriousness and importance to this moment. A member of the Giotto family ordered another person to convey the important news that a gift had been delivered from Silvano to Mr. Mario, emphasizing the significance and officiality of this message. Realizing the importance of the assignment, the boy replied that he would immediately complete the task, demonstrating his readiness and responsibility in this matter. The man and the aristocratic woman remained waiting in the drawing room, where they were surrounded by an atmosphere of refined comfort and elegance, as the wait continued in an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Blanche, with a slight worry in her voice, asked if this was a test trying to understand how seriously she was taken and what was expected of her in this situation. The subordinate replied that if the girl truly wanted to become a member of their family, she must demonstrate her usefulness and dignity by confirming that she deserves this status. Another man entered the room who, noticing the unexpected appearance of the guests, was sincerely surprised and amazed. It was Mr. Mario who came to Silvano to find out what surprise he had brought him. This visit was driven by insatiable curiosity and anticipation, anticipating something special and unexpected. Embracing Blanche, the godfather was clearly pleased with his new gift of a beautiful maiden, his face expressing joy and deep satisfaction at such a valuable acquisition. Deciding to play along with the situation, the lady waved goodbye to Silvano and said with a smile that they would see each other later, adding a lightness and friendliness to their farewell. Mario added that if such gifts continue, the peace and friendship between their families will last for decades, if not hundreds of years, thus emphasizing the importance of maintaining strong and long-term relationships. The man with glasses was amazed at the lengths Blanche was willing to go, finding her actions incredibly stupid and thoughtless, which left him feeling bewildered. A handsome guy with blonde hair was lying in bed wearing only a robe. At that moment, a guest came in, which added an unexpected element to the calm and relaxed holiday. Silvano was shocked by the sight that opened before him in the godfather's bedroom. Blanche, in an elegant black dress, towered over the fallen man, her figure casting ominous shadows on the floor. Smiling, the girl said that this man was too weak and fragile to cope with the situation, and these words sounded like a cold sentence. With a slight grin, she justified that the man's neck was too thin, so his head easily turned like a doll's playing in her hands. Silvano, overcome by a wave of anger and embarrassment, barely restraining his trembling, exclaimed with rage in his voice that the maiden had lost her mind and seemed to have completely lost touch with reality. He swore at the lady with rage because the world they had worked for 2 years to create was destroyed in an instant, like a house of cards under the blow of fate. Blanche stated with icy calm that they themselves asked her to complete the task, and now she brought them the head of that guy on a silver platter as promised. Silvano could not calm down, repeating with alarm that now a war would inevitably begin between them, which would destroy everything that they had built for so long. Blanche calmly asked her subordinate not to worry about such an insignificant detail, assuring him that the maiden had already taken care of everything and everything was under control. The handsome man, with a hint of bewilderment and slight embarrassment on his face, looked at the lady and, still not understanding the mysterious words, carefully asked what exactly she was talking about and where this conversation was leading. The girl explained that, having dealt with Mario, she had to engage in a fight with his henchmen, and therefore she was delayed. She had to change clothes because of the blood that stained her clothes. It turned out that Blanche dealt with 50 people alone, demonstrating incredible courage and skill in a difficult battle. A man with blonde hair stood up and, approaching the baby with a curious look, asked if she had really defeated all the men alone, which indicated incredible courage and strength. Shrugging her shoulders, the little girl quietly replied, with invisible determination and calmness, that her only desire was to survive at any cost, and therefore the noblewoman stopped at nothing, not allowing anything to block her path. These words caused the guy to laugh nervously, which suddenly turned into tears. He, impressed by the sincerity and severity of what was said, could not contain his emotions. Silvano could not calm down, hastily stating that they should deal with the bodies as quickly as possible and hush up the situation to prevent the possibility of other organizations finding out about what happened and starting a war. The man, with a decisive expression, ordered his subordinate to immediately take care of all the details in order to avoid further consequences and prevent any unwanted complications. Adjusting his glasses, the employee said that he would prepare all the necessary evidence and present the deceased Mario as guilty of the conflict, carefully substantiating his statement and convincing everyone of the correctness of his conclusions. Placing his hand on the lady's shoulder and looking at her with respect, Silvano said that she had done an excellent job of completing a difficult task and expressed his deep appreciation for her outstanding efforts and professionalism. After that, he added that with a girl like her, they would be able to quickly defeat all enemies and overcome any obstacles, confidently looking to the future. To these words, the blonde expressed clear disagreement, saying that the sweet and fragile Blanche should not have taken part in this matter, believing that her presence here was inappropriate and unfair. Silvano did not understand Ilio's words, especially since war was about to begin, and felt that the situation required a clearer and faster response. With warmth and a slight smile on his lips, Giotto asked Blanche, with genuine interest, if she had ever taken someone else's life, demonstrating deep and genuine curiosity. The aristocrat honestly admitted that this was the first time she had encountered such a situation, and the sincere confession was deeply touching. Silvano could not believe what he heard, and his surprise was so great and deep that he was in complete shock, unable to find words to express his feelings, and realize the scale of what was happening. Ilio, looking at the girl with curiosity, asked her age, and it turned out that she was 17 years old, but would soon turn 18. The man quickly came to the conclusion that the lady was only 2 years older than Ricardo, and this discovery was unexpected for him, completely changing the idea of the participants' age and experience. The handsome man gently placed his hand on the girl's head, with this gesture expressing his sincere support and deep admiration, which added special warmth and significance to their moment. Like a caring father, he praised Blanche for her efforts, but at the same time gently warned her not to overexert herself too much and to pay attention to her own comfort. Smiling brazenly, the girl expressed doubt that the boys would be able to cope without her help, hinting at her indispensability in this situation. Ilio, gently touching the tip of his finger to the interlocutor's nose, with a slight touch of irony and severity, ordered him not to bully him, emphasizing his sincere interest in her behavior. He explained that if they were so dependent on a newcomer, their organization would likely not be able to last as long as they did, emphasizing the importance of their team's resilience and self-sufficiency. Silvano agreed with the gentleman, noting that today, for the first time, Blanche got her hands dirty with blood, which meant her extraordinary and disturbing participation in the events taking place. The girl did not understand such concern because normal people would be shocked by the sight of a murder and could not remain indifferent to such a terrible event. When the girl mentioned the meeting with Ricardo, the men fell strangely silent, and a tense silence hung in the air as if the topic raised was extremely sensitive. Ilio promised to arrange a meeting as soon as the war ended, leaving hope for a peaceful resolution of the conflict and the restoration of all previous relations. Silvano was interested in the reasons for such a persistent desire to meet with the head's son, trying to understand what was behind this request and what hidden motives might be hidden behind it. The lady admitted that she came to him with the goal of becoming his subordinate, sincerely seeking to offer her services and demonstrate her willingness to work under his leadership. Ilio was uncomfortable saying this, but he had to admit that his son was much weaker than the lady, which created additional tension in their interaction. This was no problem for Blanche, because she knew that Ricardo planned to change himself and his circumstances in 3 years, and this impending change gave her confidence. Silvano invited the girl to become not just an assistant, but the wife of the head's son, seeing this as an opportunity for her, and introducing a new element into their relationship and plans. Moreover, the man added that the boss also had a younger son who was 11 years old, and if Blanche preferred younger ones, then this could be an additional option for her. And if the conversation went in this direction, then Silvano expressed a desire to introduce Blanche to other people of the boss, suggesting that this could be an opportunity for a new acquaintance. Far from the adults in a secluded corner stood a young boy, his invisible presence creating the impression that he was on the sidelines, watching what was happening with motionless attentiveness. The boss's youngest son had blonde hair and bright red eyes, and despite his youth, his expressive gaze was fixed on the stranger, adding a touch of mystery and intrigue to the situation. Leaning over, Blanche met Giulio, the boss's youngest son, and their meeting was filled with tense anticipation, as if this moment could radically change their future interactions. The lady, taking advantage of the moment, asked the boy if he knew where his elder brother was, but her question was immediately interrupted, and the conversation took an unexpected direction. Next to Silvano were the guys who were going to help guard the Giotto family's house. Their presence gave confidence and security. There was a friendly-looking, freckled young man named Tommy, and his warm demeanor immediately attracted attention and created an atmosphere of comfort. Next was a boy with dark hair and deep eyes, whose name was Felice. The serious look contrasted with the friendly mood of those around him. After him came Cefaro, a nice guy who, despite his good looks, was known as a mafioso, adding a complex layer to his personal reputation. Suddenly, from the window, came the loud and insistent voice of the boss, who called Silvano, saying that it was time to leave this place and hit the road since it was time to complete all matters and move on. Before leaving, the man told Blanche, with a confident tone, that they would definitely cross paths again if he managed to survive and overcome all the difficulties and obstacles that would come his way. An elegant carriage, decorated with elegant patterns, slowly rolled along the picturesque streets of the city, immersing passers-by in the atmosphere of bygone times, when luxury and grace were integral companions of city life. Looking out the window, the noblewoman realized with growing alarm that Ricardo was nowhere to be seen, and this discovery forced her to reconsider all her previous plans. Appetizing dishes lay on the table, aromatic chicken with a golden crust, and juicy meat awakening not only the appetite, but also the feeling of anticipation of the festive feast. Blanche herself, surrounded by young people, was slightly upset that only meat dishes were on the table, leaving out vegetables and salads, which made the lunch less varied and balanced. Turning to Giulio with a slight hint of concern, the lady asked if their elder brother had really once lived with them, trying to dispel vague doubts. However, before the boy could answer, the silence was suddenly broken by a loud crash of glass, breaking, causing everyone present to flinch in surprise. The boy, without losing his composure, quickly ordered everyone to immediately lie down on the floor as suddenly a firefight began, and the danger became real and close. Blanche, showing care and compassion, supported the trembling baby, who was all in fear and confusion, trying to calm him down a little in this chaotic moment. Outside through the window, a loud alarming cry from people could be heard, which repeated the mention of a mafia boss known for his immense cunning and cruelty, causing fear and trepidation among everyone around him. The man nearby, carefully assessing the situation, quickly counted the number of attackers and came to the conclusion that there were only 14 of them, which made it possible to better plan further actions. The boys came to the conclusion that the attackers learned about the murder of Mario and the conflict that affected them, which was the reason for such an unexpected attack. When the girl raised her hand, declaring that she too could fight, her words were interrupted by streams of curses from her enemies, who showered Giotto with the latest offensive epithets. The guys were extremely unhappy that the cowardly bastards who invaded their home behaved like rats, using meanness and unscrupulousness to get into where no one was waiting for them. Quietly and with deep regret, Blanche admitted her guilt in this attack, realizing that her actions led to such unpleasant consequences that she is now trying to correct. It turned out that the girl accidentally stepped on the roof of someone else's building when she tried to climb higher to find a secluded place to hide from her pursuers. Then, standing on the roof, the lady felt the tiles under her feet begin to crumble, along with the wooden boards, creating a feeling of instability and threat. The men could not believe the words of their companion, believing that it was just a joke or a prank. The story seemed so incredible and surprising to them that they perplexed exchanged glances full of doubt. Scratching her head, Blanche expressed dissatisfaction and irritably asked who exactly dared to claim that the words were a joke. In her opinion, this was the absolute truth. While the workers were unsuccessfully trying to figure out how to deal with the situation, the noblewoman stood up from her seat and resolutely declared that she could handle the attackers herself without needing outside help. The men tried to convince the little lady that the words about her own abilities were an excessive exaggeration, asking her not to say anything stupid and not to inflate her abilities to implausible proportions. Suddenly, a loud crash was heard, which made the ladies and companions become alert and look around warily in search of the source of the sound. At this moment, all members of the Elio family simultaneously turned in the direction where the sound came from, alertly straining their senses and preparing for a possible threat. Suddenly, footsteps were heard, and black spiders crawled out of the thick darkness, slowly sliding along the fallen boards, each step accompanied by ominous and piercing creaks. Enemies burst into the room, seeking with brutal determination to seize everything around and take revenge, leaving no room for doubt about their intentions. Holding a crossbow in his hand, a handsome man with blonde hair and an impudent smile turned to Blanche, calling her a beauty with such dazzling charm. With a man named Guillermo, who was 19 years old, were two of his friends, and all three appeared in the room ready to act and support each other in the coming conflict. The bandit, closely examining Blanche, inquired what she ate to become such a beauty, clearly surprised by her attractiveness and wanting to know the secret of her charming appearance. The lady was amazed to learn that the other mafia boss had an impressive 320 morality points, which was an unexpected and surprising contrast to his reputation. The girl, with undisguised disbelief, asked if the strangers had come with the intention of seizing new territories, since their appearance raised doubts in her about their true motives. The guy laughed, boasting that despite his young age, he had already become the head of the Campano criminal organization. Courage and ambition were clearly visible in his behavior. Pointing an accusing finger at the guys, the lady did not hesitate to call them real scoundrels, and the words, full of disdain and condemnation, sounded especially harsh and contemptuous. To put it harshly, Blanche stated that they were all far from clean and had an unpleasant odor, clearly demonstrating their contempt and dissatisfaction. Guillermo became confused when the girl came closer and started talking about the stench and dirt. Her words clearly confused him and made him feel awkward. Grabbing the man by the jacket, the noblewoman suggested that they go out and talk outside so as not to dirty the house. The proposal sounded both confident and demanding. Confused, the guy asked the stranger to let him go. His voice trembled with excitement and awkwardness as he felt uncomfortable in the current situation. Having tried to threaten the lady, Guillermo said that he could very well end her life. The rude words sounded ominous and clearly hinted at the seriousness of his intentions. The system notified that due to the high level of morality, the guy would not attack the lady. As a result, he agreed to go out on his own, 2 legs, without offering resistance. When the lady finally let go of the collar of her Guillermo jacket, the guy turned away, covering his face red with embarrassment, with his hand trying to hide his awkward state. Turning to the guys, the leader asked if they had checked the house, to which they replied that the estate was empty and did not pose any threat. The man, with obvious irritation on his face, shouted what a terrible and soulless person Ilya was, that he left only a woman and a child in the house, abandoning them to their fate. Suddenly, as if materializing out of thin air, Blanche appeared, reminding with cold calm that the interlocutor himself had made the decision to leave the house, leaving on his own feet. Clumsily and with noticeable excitement, Guillermo said that he had decided to stay a little longer, especially in order to fully ensure the safety of his companion. Suddenly, something so stunning happened that it made the mafia boss scared out of his wits. In a panic, he immediately ordered all his subordinates to immediately leave the scene and go to a safe place. The guy, without hesitation, rushed forward to protect Blanche with his body from the flying sharp shards of glass, which burst with a loud crack. Guillermo was amazed at how such a large crowd of people had gathered at the scene in just a few minutes, marveling at the speed with which the situation attracted so many spectators. People outside spoke out in outrage, declaring that they were ready to start a real war for the Giotto family if their demands were not met. Irritated, Guillermo noticed how the people from the street were looking at them intently and greedily, with their eyes full of a hungry and angry gleam, like predatory wolves ready to pounce at any second and cause trouble. At that moment, the boy, with trepidation and excitement, turned to his older sister, urgently begging her to stop destroying other people's homes and causing suffering to innocent people. Turning to Blanche, the man was amazed and surprised that all these worries and troubles that had just happened were directly related to this mysterious and bewitching woman. The noblewoman reminded Guillermo that he had planned to leave this place, and this reminder made him deeply aware that the moment for his departure had arrived, no matter how hard he tried to delay this moment. After this, the guy suggested to the lady that since the situation had deteriorated so much, she had better leave the house as quickly as possible and go to a safe place before it was too late. The mafia boss, turning around, noted with deep disappointment that in our time there were no true gentlemen left who would be able to be embarrassed by harming a lady, and this sight saddened him to the core. Turning to face the interlocutor, Blanche firmly and decisively stated that only she herself has the right to decide what to do and when to do it, not wanting to allow anyone to interfere with her personal decisions. Everyone present froze in anticipation when an elegant lady in an evening dress emerged from the mansion. The steps were small and refined, giving each movement a special grace and sophistication. In a loud voice, the little girl stated that she was sent by the Giotto family to make the girl guilty of everything that happened. The words turned out to be true, revealing the hidden intentions and reasons for Blanche's presence. Local townspeople did not believe that it turned out that it was Giulio standing not far from Blanche and attracting everyone's attention with his eccentric behavior, which could not go unnoticed. Fragile baby could be the culprit and began to be indignant, accusing Ilio of deciding to hide behind a woman in order to avoid responsibility. In a loud voice and in front of everyone present, the girl declared that she challenged the throne of this city, since this was the only chance for escape and freedom. Together with her boyfriend, the lady rode forward majestically on her horse. Her determination was obvious. The baby challenged the king of this city, and despite his arrogance, he could not afford to reject the bold and daring challenge. Pressing his companion's ear, Guillermo, with a serious and insistent tone, invited her to take the last chance and leave this dangerous place while there was still an opportunity to slip away unnoticed. The guy was convinced that despite the incredible strength and resilience of the baby, her efforts would not matter at all, since she would still not be able to defeat the king. A large and fat man sat on a throne set in the middle of the street. His majestic appearance was surrounded by guards who tirelessly guarded him, ensuring the complete safety and protection of the owner. An adult man eating his food with obvious pleasure suddenly let out a loud and intense cry, full of anger and indignation, asking who dared to challenge him. Seeing the fragile Blanche, the fat man was amazed and surprised that this gentle young lady dared to disturb the peace and challenge him to fight, causing him deep bewilderment. With a mockery, the rude man said that perhaps the fragile maiden was mistaken, and instead of becoming a rival in the ring, she should have become his partner in bed. The girl could not help but notice that the man had outstanding endurance and impressive strength, which became more and more obvious as the actions progressed. Thanks to the magic bracelet, the lady's strength has increased significantly, becoming much more impressive compared to what it was at the very beginning of her journey. A piece of apple suddenly fell and ended up right at the lady's feet, which made her look at the randomly fallen fruit. The benevolent man generously provided the lady with the opportunity to refuse the battle for beauty, allowing her to avoid conflict and maintain her dignity. Amerigo gave the wisdom that you should not engage in battle with an enemy who is clearly superior to you, because wisdom lies in the ability to avoid unequal battles. Blanche did not object to the fact that her opponent was significantly stronger, realizing that trying to argue it would be futile. However, the little girl was intrigued by where exactly Amerigo got these apples, which aroused her keen interest and many questions. The man, thinking that the lady might have a desire to eat fruit, remarked that he could provide it to her if she were more affectionate and friendly. When the little girl began to open her inventory and move her hand in the air, her opponent could not understand what exactly she was doing and how it could affect their interaction. Amerigo ordered the lady to immediately stop her nonsense and senseless actions, which only hindered the matter. And after that, they finally began the long-awaited battle. The rivals stood in front of each other, ready to fight, their eyes locked, and the tension grew, creating a tense atmosphere before the brutal battle began. Blanche swung determined and purposeful, preparing to strike the first blow. Her movements were full of tense strength and confidence. Every muscle in her body was ready for action, radiating determination and concentration. Amerigo was stunned when a powerful blow struck by the maiden hit him in the stomach, and suddenly blood appeared on his body. What happened shocked him, and he froze, not expecting such a turn of events. When Blanche extended her hand, it was covered with a bright red liquid, indicating that the blow was not only accurate, but also bloody. People watched in shock, like spectators in the stands, unable to intervene or change the course of events, their faces reflecting a mixture of surprise and helplessness. The guards were amazed to see that someone had managed to defeat the master. Their faces expressed a mixture of shock and disbelief, since such an event was completely unexpected and incredible for them. The lady asked if the people nearby were members of the Mila family. The voice sounded with notes of concern and interest, as she tried to find out if they were connected with personalities important to her. With curiosity, the little girl asked where exactly they got the apples. Her big eyes sparkled with interest, and the question was full of expectation and desire to know the details. The men, trembling with fear, pointed with trepidation to the majestic greenhouse, where powerful trees like guardians of secrets rose among the greenery and silence. The large house, as if it had absorbed warmth and light, was flooded with sunlight, which gently slid along its walls, giving it even more grandeur and comfort. While enjoying the juicy apples harvested in honor of her well-deserved victory, Blanche suddenly received notice that her reputation had increased significantly. Soon a young man approached her, his voice filled with both interest and alarm, as he asked if the lady was really able to kill Amerigo and win such a decisive battle. Elio and Silvano were deeply amazed and surprised by what they heard, their faces expressing genuine amazement, since the news was so unexpected and incredible. Guillermo came to the girl's defense, who now addressed her with reverence and respect, like a queen, emphasizing her importance and greatness in his eyes. Giotto, not recognizing the guy as a member of his family, curiously asked who he was and how he was connected with them, since such a presence was unexpected and mysterious for him. With a grin, the boy said that at 19, he was the boss of the mafia, and now he occupied the place of Blanche's right hand, demonstrating his influence and importance in those around him. Sighing wearily, Elio realized that the guy in question was a mushroom smuggler, which explained his strange behavior and secrecy. Looking questioningly at her interlocutor, the maiden asked if he had said something about mushrooms used in Argot, trying to understand whether the interlocutor had something specific in mind or if it was just a random mention. The man hastened to explain that the boy spoke directly and frankly, and that it was specifically about smuggling in order to dispel any doubts and misunderstandings. For the aristocrat, this came as a complete surprise, since Guillermo was known for his high morality and impeccable behavior, which made his act especially surprising and incomprehensible. The guy could not restrain himself, and with contempt in his voice, ordered the rich people not to look down on him, expressing his deep contempt for their arrogant behavior and social arrogance. Guillermo cursed, expressing his outrage and indignation, as he said that evil men had monopolized their entire city, taking over its resources and power. As soon as the conversation in the company became particularly tense, it was interrupted by a voice that, addressing Blanche with respect, called Her Majesty, thereby reminding everyone of her high status and merit. These were bandits who, having lost their king, now sought to make the lady their queen, thus hoping to restore their influence and power under new leadership. Silvano quietly informed his boss that now all the property has passed to the beauty, thereby emphasizing that the baby has become the new owner and owner of significant assets. Elio understood that this meant that these people were going to do everything possible to ensure that Blanche became part of their family, thereby seeking to strengthen their position. Soon the guys simultaneously turned to the aristocrat, who was quietly eating an apple, and asked what she was going to do, now waiting for her decision and reaction to the current situation. In response, Blanche said that she had no intention of becoming part of Miele, since her true goal was to become Ricardo's subordinate, thereby seeking to realize her own ambitions. However, this did not mean that the girl was not going to take the property she had won, which she needed for one important matter related to her future plans. Sitting on a throne in front of an excited crowd, the lady held a crown in her hands, symbolizing her new power and greatness, and her gaze radiated confidence and determination. The little one already knew that the residents were unhappy with what had happened some time ago, and realized how much this discontent could affect the city. After much deliberation and careful consideration of all the circumstances, Blanche finally decided that she was punishing the Giotto family in an effort to restore justice and satisfy grievances. With a sinister grin on her face, the lady, full of malicious pleasure, announced that they intended to set fire to Ilio's house in exactly 2 days, fomenting fear and destruction in anticipation of their evil plan. Silvano was extremely dissatisfied with this turn of events, declaring that the aristocrat had completely lost her mind, displaying unimaginable madness and violating all boundaries of reason. Blanche continued saying with cold stubbornness that right now she intended to reveal the hidden treasure of the Miele family, showing determination and confidence. Grinning wickedly, the girl added that she wanted to see how everything plunged into chaos and destruction. The noblewoman declared that people could take whatever they wanted from the cache of wealth steal and take from each other, enjoying the mayhem. The fire burned relentlessly, engulfing the house with unrelenting fury and burning it down, leaving only ashes and charred remains as grim evidence of its destructive wrath. Silvano watched the destruction from the window, barely holding back tears, his soul filled with deep grief and hopelessness as the fire inexorably consumed everything that was dear and meaningful to him. Smiling with a malicious note, Guillermo said that fools focused all their attention on the treasure, not noticing that the real dangers and opportunities lay beyond their narrow vision. Unable to contain his emotions, the guy began to enthusiastically praise the girl, who was not only amazingly strong, but also unusually beautiful, possessing incredible qualities. After her shower, Blanche listened intently to the words of Silvano, who expressed his dissatisfaction with the fire in the mansion, clearly disappointed that his expectations were not met. The lady hastened to explain that such measures were absolutely necessary in order to calm the heated crowd, satisfying the demands and preventing further unrest and disturbance. This explanation failed to reassure the bespectacled subordinate, who was convinced that Blanche was the culprit of all the problems. Dissatisfaction and irritation continued to grow despite the lady's attempts to justify her actions. The lady's answer was dry and unperturbed. There was just hot water in the Screws family's house, and this was quite enough to calm everyone down despite the obvious dissatisfaction. This did not satisfy only Silvano, while Guillermo, by order of Blanche, was sent to go and take a shower to freshen up and put himself in order. After listening to the lady, the guy immediately headed to the door, deciding to immediately follow the instructions and leave the room in order to follow her order and not cause further complaints. Elio, remaining close to the lady, carefully asked for the opportunity to talk, seeking to discuss important issues in a private setting where everything could be discussed in more detail and without interruption. The room was richly decorated with luxurious decorative elements and exquisite furniture, creating an atmosphere of refined nobility and elegance that amazed with its grace and comfort. Finally, the lady learned that Ricardo had been held captive by the evil count all this time, which was unexpected and alarming news for her, causing her heart to beat faster with excitement and anxiety. It turned out that 10 years ago, Juan took a large loan from a mafia boss to start a business and did not repay it, which now greatly complicated the situation and raised many problems. 2 months ago, Ricardo set out to repay the principal and interest, but was never able to complete the task, failing to repay the money and ending up being captured by the aristocrat. And although Elio promised a generous reward for saving his son, no one was able to fulfill this promise and return the boy, leaving the problem unresolved and aggravating an already difficult situation. The man did not even know whether the child was alive, and this uncertainty only increased anxiety and worry, creating a gloomy atmosphere of uncertainty. The girl tried to cheer up the boss, assuring him that Ricardo was not someone who could be easily defeated, and that his strength and determination made him an insurmountable opponent in any circumstances. Giotto invited the lady to take responsibility for saving the guy herself, thereby automatically becoming a subordinate and taking on all the obligations associated with this. The little girl honestly admitted that she was not particularly eager to carry out this proposal. The words reflected her doubts and lack of enthusiasm for the proposed role. Perplexed, the head of the mafia asked why she refused the offer, trying to understand the reasons for doubts and reluctance to carry out the given assignment, and to understand what could have caused such a decision. The girl replied that she simply did not feel the desire to complete this task, and ending the conversation stepped aside Elio in complete bewilderment and with many questions. Giotto reflected that it is impossible to effectively manage an organization when one of the subordinates acts on his own and ignores orders, breaking discipline and creating chaos in the structure. Coldly and decisively, the man stated that in this case, the maiden would no longer be considered a member of the Giotto family, emphasizing that her actions had led to a loss of status and trust. These words stopped the lady, and she immediately turned towards the mafia, ready to take the necessary measures and rethink her position in the light of new circumstances. Elio then added that Blanche already knew a way to get back, implying that she had a plan to restore her position and fix the problems that had arisen. The man did not care whether the maiden greeted Ricardo or not. It was too dangerous to leave such a strange and unpredictable girl in the organization, since instability could seriously threaten internal order and security. Blanche lost her lightheartedness, becoming stern and immersed in serious reflections, which replaced her former lightness and distinctiveness. It was a new day, and the white manor shone in the morning light as a symbol of freshness and the beginning of something beautiful, filling the surrounding atmosphere with a feeling of new hope and harmony. Silvano could not understand that the lady who had always seemed the epitome of nobility had decided to leave the family, calling Ilio an idiot and breaking all previous ties that seemed unshakable. Guillermo beamed with joy as he stood opposite the queen, telling her of his desire to join their family, his big eyes shining with excitement and happiness. Blanche noticed with surprise that she did not immediately recognize the guy who passed by her. He had changed so much that he now looked much more attractive and confident than before. In addition, the lady was stopped by a loud voice that kept calling her as a sister and asked her to wait so that she could first deal with the current situation and resolve all the issues that had arisen. The boy tremblingly held out the gift, an exquisite necklace on which was gracefully made a miniature figurine of an elephant symbolizing good luck and prosperity. Giulio explained that if the little girl showed this amulet to her brother, he would be sure that the lady belonged to the noble Giotto family, known for its history and influence. Silvano happily handed over his gift, which was carefully wrapped and exuded special warmth and attention, put into every detail, demonstrating a sincere desire to make this moment special and memorable. It was a portrait on a sticker, which could be very useful if a lady was faced with the need to hide her identity, since it had the unique ability to easily adapt to different images. Blanche wore an exquisite cape, which gave her image not only special charm and elegance, but also warmed her from the cold, creating coziness and warmth. Guillermo asked his queen to always stay warm and comfortable, emphasizing that comfort and safety are of paramount importance to him, and the guy is ready to do everything to make her feel protected and loved. In response, the little girl said that if fate turns out to be favorable to them, they will still be able to meet and spend time together despite all the obstacles and difficulties that may stand in their way. All the guys warned Blanche strongly, advising her to be especially careful and attentive, taking into account the many possible risks and hidden dangers that could lurk at every step. The aristocrat was well aware that after being expelled from the family, she could become an enemy for Ricardo, which was absolutely unacceptable, and was determined to avoid this at all costs. Under the cover of night, the mansion was shrouded in thick darkness, its majestic walls hidden in shadow, creating an atmosphere of mystery and intrigue that attracted attention and aroused curiosity. The maids walking along the corridors expressed regret for Madame Mariette. Her difficult situation and suffering aroused their sincere sympathy and concern. However, the grief did not last long, as soon after the wedding, the maids received new assignments, which brought them new opportunities and prospects. The freckled maid turned to her partner and rudely reminded her that she should also show gratitude for the work done, emphasizing the importance of acknowledging efforts and showing respect. Their friend's name was Irene, but in fact she was Blanche, carefully hiding her true face under an ugly mask so as not to arouse suspicion among others. The maids immediately realized that the strict Mrs. Mariette would be very angry when she saw such an ugly woman, and that this would cause her a storm of emotions and discontent. Smiling, Irene offered to take the food to the guards in the basement so they wouldn't have to worry about food and could focus on their work. One of the maids asked in bewilderment why they needed to go to the basement where almost no one looks, and this caused some confusion and additional questions among everyone. They accepted her friend's words that she wanted to bring medicine to the prisoner, when in fact the girl should have taken better care of herself. Irene listened silently, as she was ordered to follow only clear instructions, without unnecessary questions or explanations, accepting it as inevitable and strict requirements. Last night, Blanche easily made her way into the dungeon, adding sleeping pills to the guards' food in order to ensure freedom of action and carry out her plan without interference. The lady walked past the sleeping man without causing him any harm and trying not to disturb the silence around. Grabbing the bars of the bars, the aristocrat called Ricardo by name. The voice sounded in the dark silence, as if calling to him from the depths of the night, but he never responded. It was only when Blanche gently touched his black hair that her attention was drawn, and he finally turned his gaze to the guest, realizing the presence of the baby in this gloomy place. However, instead of understanding other people's intentions, the boy fearfully moved away from the lady, shouting for her to immediately move away and not hurt Emmy. While the servant was scolding her partner, she was deep in thought about the failure of her plan due to the guy's loud cry, which attracted unwanted attention and ruined everything. Throwing the clothes onto Blanche with obvious contempt, the lady abruptly declared that if she did not manage to wash Mariette's dress on time, she would be left without food, forcing her to make a tough choice. Another maid was worried about whether their partner was okay, and she tried with persistent concern to find out if everything was okay and if the poor thing needed help. They were good girls who were genuinely concerned about the new servants in the estate and kindly shared their bread with her, showing care and support. Brushing aside their worried questions and trying to remain calm, Irene confidently stated that everything was fine, despite her internal doubts, thereby reassuring those around her. Phoebe and Agate were deeply moved by their friend's morality, her nobility, which made them see in her an example of true humanity. But Blanche did not eat stale bread, because she had large supplies of stew and fresh apples in stock, which she preferred to use instead. Smiling sweetly, the girl asked not to linger, and to continue her work without her, since she needed to go about her important business, leaving everyone to calmly go about their tasks. Dressed in a beautiful pink patterned dress, Blanche headed into the basement, her outfit contrasting with the dark atmosphere of the place, creating a bright accent in the gloomy setting. The guard immediately reacted to the night visitor, warily asking who exactly was in the basement and what brought him to this place at such a late hour. Quite quickly, he recognized the stranger as Mrs. Mariette, who had urgent business. The lady dismissed the guard so that she could calmly resolve her issues. The man could not help but obey the mistress, and silently handed her the keys, realizing the importance of the urgent matter and the need for impeccable compliance with strict orders. When the guard left, Blanche walked to the bars, quietly opened the cage leading to the prisoner's chambers, and with determination and caution, she entered, preparing for the important stage of her carefully thought-out plan. Quietly, with aristocratic grace, she pronounced the name Ricardo, as if each syllable was a precious stone that illuminated her silent surroundings, with a soft light adding a touch of elegance to the atmosphere. The guy, seriously wounded, sat on the bed, not paying attention to the light breaking through the curtains, or to the night guest who entered the room with a quiet step, not expressing the slightest sign of interest. With the soft light filling the room, Blanche couldn't help but notice Ricardo's exceptional beauty, which was truly mesmerizing. Looking at the guy's status, the lady realized that his stress was at a surprisingly high level, reaching 999 units. This number indicated deep emotional tension and complexity of the internal state. Without thinking for long, the aristocrat took out her special lantern and used the item to slightly reduce the stress level of the boy, who found himself in such a predicament. Slowly, the stress level began to decrease, and the guy, as if awakening from a deep state, asked who was this mysterious lady who showed such concern for him. Approaching the wounded man, Blanche introduced herself with confident grace, pronouncing her name with sincerity and respect, hoping that this would help establish rapport and inspire the trust necessary for further interaction. After this, the lady slowly, and with special trepidation, took from her handbag an exquisite pendant, which she came to give to him, holding it out, with the hope that this gift would become a symbol of their mutual understanding. Tears welled up in Ricardo's eyes when he saw the small figure of an elephant in front of him, which recalled touching memories and awakened deep-seated emotions. From the happiness that overwhelmed him, the man could not hold back his tears when he realized that Ilio had really sent the one who became his savior and brought hope in a difficult moment. Crying with deep emotion, the boy demanded that the lady immediately remove the shackles that bound him and allow him to regain freedom and relief. Seeing a simple bunch of keys in the hands of the savior, Ricardo fell into despair, realizing that these keys were not suitable for liberation. Only Giacomo had the key to saving the boy. Not understanding who exactly they were talking about, Blanche asked with obvious interest and persistence who this person was in order to clarify his role in current events and understand what significance he had for everything that was happening. Quietly, almost in a whisper, Ricardo muttered that this man was the right hand of the evil count, a faithful assistant about whom the darkest rumors circulated. This man with a beard was a real sadist. His presence caused such fear and horror that even the bravest people preferred to avoid the villain so as not to become victims of cruelty. Covering his face with his hands, Ricardo admitted that Giacomo often came to brutally punish the boy, leaving him in constant fear and suffering. Suddenly, the lady interrupted the guy's speech, saying that she did not have time for long listening, and she must immediately get down to her business. This caused such a storm of emotions in the handsome man that his face was flooded with tears of shock, as if an unexpected wave of shock washed away his fragile composure. Grabbing Blanche's hand, he begged her not to leave, turning to the sweet aristocrat with hope and anxiety in his voice, as if his whole life depended on this decision to stay. Ricardo admitted that he no longer wanted to be alone. The body trembled with deep melancholy and fear of loneliness, which seemed unbearable. The beauty calmly replied that she had no intention of leaving at all, especially without the son of the mafia boss, whose status and influence clearly gave the words additional significance and weight. The girl, tightly grasping the handcuffs that were shackling the guy, acted with determination and confidence, as if she knew that she was the one who had to change the current situation and help him get out of this predicament. The handcuffs, made of metal, broken by Blanche's force, fell to the floor with a dull thud, leaving behind a trail of broken chain and destroyed strength. In complete shock, Ricardo, not believing his own eyes, stared at his freed hands as if he could not believe the reality of what had happened and the miracle that had just happened. With a gentle smile, the aristocrat noted that apparently the boy had to endure a lot of difficulties and suffering. The words were full of sympathy and understanding for the young tester of fate. Suddenly, the system reported that Ricardo's stress level began to rise again, signaling the growing tension and anxiety that was once again engulfing the mafioso. The virgin, frozen in place, realized that, because of her innocent joke, she had hurt her interlocutor, and her face lit up with remorse, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Concerned, and with a slight tremor in her voice, Blanche cautiously asked if Ricardo would be able to get to his feet, given that he was weakened and clearly having difficulty moving. The boy tried to get up, but soon fell to the floor again, and the lady, sighing with slight regret, told him to take his time and gather his strength to try again. This frightened the guy even more, who, fearing the arrival of Giacomo, realized that all the past time he had been being bullied by the assistant of the evil count. Blanche sincerely felt sorry for the poor boy who was afraid of everything and whose level of anxiety was extremely high, as if a reflection of her own fears a long time ago when she herself was in the same position. Placing her hand on the shoulder of a new acquaintance, the maiden tried to calm the young man, showing sincere kindness and support to help him cope with excitement and anxiety. She promised that she would not allow Giacomo to harm Ricardo, assuring him that she would protect him from any dangerous interference and evil intentions. Their hands touched, and Blanche, looking into his eyes, swore with her name allegiance and devotion to the guy, promising to support and protect him from any threats. As if out of nowhere, a plate of food appeared in front of them, as if materializing straight out of thin air, bringing with it the feeling of an unexpected and pleasant surprise. Blanche affectionately asked the hungry Ricardo if he liked the pork leg soup, showing concern and a desire to treat him to something tasty and filling. Outside, there was a blanket of snow that quietly and peacefully covered the ground, creating a winter wonderland of snow-white expanses and sparkling ice crystals. The maids whispered among themselves, expressing dissatisfaction with the new girl, who looked strange and did not fit into the usual circle of their familiar and usual affairs. Irene thought that getting rid of Giacomo would reduce Ricardo's stress levels significantly, believing that eliminating the source of his anxiety would help him calm down and recover. Suddenly, an unpleasant voice interrupted her thoughts, sharply distracting the girl from the stream of thoughts and returning her to reality with unexpected and overwhelming force. The Marquis came out into the street, holding a gun in his hands, and quickly walked towards the servants. Confident steps and a determined look clearly showed that he was serious. The maid with blonde hair began to make excuses, explaining that she was simply raising a new girl, trying to convince the Marquise that her actions were only part of the job and had no malicious intent. The man immediately drew attention to Blanche, who at that moment turned away, trying to hide her awkwardness and avoid looking directly at him. The nobleman could not help but notice the striking resemblance between the maid and his runaway daughter, which attracted attention and triggered a wave of memories and emotions. However, Juan soon appeared, turning to his father-in-law with obvious concern, asking if there had been any problems with the servants. His voice betrayed anxiety and a desire to understand the situation. The Marquise immediately lost hope and admitted that he had simply remembered his late daughter, which had brought back painful memories and broken his resolve. The Count understood that seeing a servant similar in age to the deceased, the aristocrat experienced deep sadness and melancholy caused by the sad memory of the loss. Without hesitation, Juan announced that all 3 maids had been fired, thus deciding to sort out the problem and stop further misunderstandings. Turning to Giacomo, the Count ordered that the poor girl who had been wronged be taken care of in order to alleviate his father-in-law's sadness and avoid further unpleasant emotions. For Blanche, this was a pleasant surprise, because she finally learned the identity of the villain who dared to offend Ricardo, which allowed her to see his true face and understand who was behind the suffering. Giacomo agreed to appoint Irene as his personal maid and to closely monitor her to ensure her safety and proper performance of her duties. Juan himself ordered the Marquise to stop thinking about the dead and focus on the living Mariette, who was beautiful and deserved more attention and care. With a smile, the nobleman reminded the aristocrat about the upcoming wedding ceremony, which was to take place very soon, and that it was worth focusing on preparing for this important event. Blanche was extremely pleased that, being Giacomo's personal assistant, it was not difficult for her to get to him and carry out an elaborate plan of revenge. The only thing she continued to think about until now was how exactly she should end this disgusting man in order to get rid of his abomination once and for all. Ricardo sat comfortably on the bed, covered with a soft sheet, feeling completely satisfied after a hearty lunch, the taste of which still remained on the tongue, causing pleasant sensations and peace. Thoughtfully, the boy rubbed his hands, just freed from heavy chains, feeling the long-awaited freedom and deliverance from the torment that he had endured with great difficulty. During punishments, Giacomo often called Ricardo by his father's name and ordered him to look at himself in order to emphasize his superiority and humiliate the young guy. Ricardo still could not get rid of painful memories that, like shadows, brought fear and horror to him, haunting him even in the calmest moments and not allowing him to find inner peace. The only consolation for the young man was the promise of protection from Blanche, which at the same time aroused in him a feeling of embarrassment and relief, giving him hope for safety. Suddenly, the figure of a sweet aristocrat holding a lantern in her hand appeared in front of him. Dazzling and captivating beauty filled the air with an atmosphere of mysterious charm. Slowly, she approached Ricardo. The women's movements were graceful and fluid, adding mystery and charm to the incredible image. Immersed in dark memories of a bloody battle that took away not only his peace, but also a piece of his heart, the guy was lost in deep thoughts about how this tragic event radically changed his entire life. Upset Juan listened to a report from an assistant who said that all 5 of Mariette's ladies-in-waiting had quit, unable to withstand the pressure before the wedding and the complex character of the mistress. The Count was not happy that his future wife would go down the aisle without a servant, since this could significantly undermine the man's reputation and create an undesirable public image. When the conversation turned to candidates for the position of maid of honor, the subordinate suddenly remembered one girl who seemed to be an ideal choice for this role, given her outstanding qualities and suitability for the requirements. Mariette could not contain her deep hostility when she saw the new maid of honor, and her face immediately betrayed strong displeasure and irritation, which was difficult to hide even behind a carefully hidden mask of politeness. Standing nearby was Irene, whose face was disfigured and deformed, which only increased the feeling of discomfort and tension in the air. Every glance at the distorted appearance gave rise to a continuous feeling of anxiety and confusion. The older maid explained to the mistress that she had been sent on behalf of the Count's assistant, adding details to clarify the situation and clear up any misunderstandings. Blanche sighed heavily, not wanting to go deeper into the analysis and deal with the bad mood of the stupid Mariette, preferring to avoid a new conflict. The once older sister approached the younger sister, extending her hand in her direction and expressing something vague that could be perceived as a desire for acceptance. The lady was completely satisfied that next to such a monster, she would seem even more beautiful, and this added to her confidence in her unique attractiveness. To confirm her words, the aristocrat turned to her younger brother, who was absorbed in his studies, and attracted his attention to reinforce her words and demonstrate that she was right. However, Alphonse sided with the maid, noting that it was probably unpleasant for her to listen to insults addressed to her, and expressed his sympathy for her difficult situation. Looking ahead with empty eyes, the boy remembered how Mariette had also insulted Blanche, and his gaze was filled with bitterness and regret from these memories. Having prevailed over her brother, the aristocrat ordered that this name should never be uttered again, deciding that it should not be uttered in her presence and should not darken good days. The Marquis entered the room just as Mariette began to insult her ex-sister, which only aggravated the tension in the situation and drew his attention to the conflict. Noticing her father's arrival, the lady immediately changed her anger to the deepest sadness. Her face immediately took on an expression of sadness, and she began to cry, unable to hide her sudden pain and disappointment. The nobleman noticed the scarred maid, who now served his daughter, and noted with great interest that this appearance reminded him of Blanche. This parallel image evoked a strange and fascinating sensation. The other family members could not help but notice the familiar voice that belonged to the lady, and this voice aroused memories and surprise in them, since it was well known to them. The man was quick to condemn his living daughter for daring to compare Blanche with a maid, saying that the younger girl had been dead for a long time and did not deserve such comparisons. The beautiful noblewoman herself blamed her father for letting the girl go so easily and immediately arranging a wedding for Mariette, considering this an unfair and undignified approach. Irene watched as the former family fought, feeling a hidden satisfaction as the hatred towards them was great, and she enjoyed their suffering and conflicts. The father strictly ordered his daughter to forget about all unnecessary and insignificant things, strongly advising her to concentrate on preparing for the wedding, emphasizing the importance of complete immersion in this process and the exclusion of all distractions. This caused deep disgust in Mariette, since the thought that she would become the wife of the terrible count who inspired horror caused deep disappointment and depression in her. In this case, the Marquis ordered the relatives to make every effort to regain the favor of the third prince, realizing that restoring his sympathy was vital to further plans and strengthening their position. This upset Mariette, who angrily ordered that the scoundrel should not be mentioned again, feeling deeply dissatisfied and disgusted at the situation that put her in an uncomfortable position. But Blanche knew from the very beginning that this relationship would sooner or later lead to a break between the sisters, when suddenly she noticed the gaze of her younger brother, who was full of attentive interest and deep concern. The boy, with obvious interest and some excitement, asked if the maid's name was Irene, trying to find out if this name was the same as one he had once heard or known. Alphonse ordered the servant to go out and take a walk, leaving Blanche alone. She had no choice but to agree, playing her part and trying to keep her calm. The two of them slowly moved through the cold and gloomy corridors of the mansion, where their every step echoed along the empty walls, creating an atmosphere of solitude and mystery that was enhanced by the silence around them. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, Giacomo appeared, joyfully greeting the young master with a warm smile and genuine enthusiasm that suddenly enlivened the area around him. Watching from the sidelines, the conversation between the Count's brother and the servant Blanche began to think about why the second had so much free time, and how this might be related to his responsibilities. Upset, Blanche realized that if this person appeared in front of Ricardo, it could ruin everything and destroy everything that the little girl had strived for and worked for so long. A boy in prison was startled when he heard a noise that awoke his anxiety, causing his heart to race and leaving him unsure of what might happen next. Biting his finger, he trembled under the covers, trying to contain his fear and not reveal his state of anxiety and excitement that gripped him at that moment. Frightened and worried, Ricardo worried deep down that Giacomo had come again to hurt him, as he had done before. But instead of experiencing torment, the young man met a sweet lady who had previously freed him from his shackles, and now he found himself under her kind and attentive influence. In complete surprise and delight, the boy suddenly screamed, threw the blanket aside, and with trepidation in his voice pronounced the name of his savior, radiating sincere gratitude. Before Blanche could ask about the health of the mafia boss's son, the boss himself rushed to the lady with obvious concern, trying to make sure that she was not just a dream. Having affectionately hugged the lady, the boy caused her slight embarrassment, which was reflected in her reddened cheeks, and the noblewoman felt tenderness and warmth from this unexpected gesture. A sincere and satisfied smile appeared on the young man's lips, reflecting his inner happiness and satisfaction from the moment that happened. With tears in his eyes, the boy tremblingly admitted that he had been awaiting the arrival of his savior with great impatience and deep emotion. The words were filled with a sincere feeling of gratitude and relief. Politely and with genuine concern, Blanche inquired about Ricardo's well-being, expressing her concern and desire to know how he was feeling after the incident, to make sure that everything was okay. Like a faithful servant, the boy reported that he felt great and was ready to escape at any moment, demonstrating his full readiness and vigilance. The lady did not share this opinion, as she believed that the guy's endurance still left much to be desired and was insufficient to cope with the current difficulties. While the young man was embarrassed, the aristocrat remembered that she had the same endurance back when she was just starting out and was at level 1. Seeing his companion's bad mood, Ricardo suggested that they set up the lantern together, hoping that working together would lift her spirits and bring a little comfort. The aristocrat refused, explaining that the lamp could only serve 5 more times, and it would be wiser to leave the thing for extreme cases when its use becomes really necessary. Ricardo stared sadly at the dimly glowing lantern. The look was full of melancholy and reflected inner sadness, as if he was looking for solace in this modest source of light. Confused, the guy confessed to the girl that if the remaining amount of light quickly depletes, they should spend this time together to enjoy the moment and make it special. Blanche could not refuse the young man's request, and therefore, with tenderness and understanding, she sat down on the bed to spend this time with him and support him in the moment that was important to him. Trying not to stutter and hiding his excitement, Ricardo asked the girl what she had been doing all this time. The male voice betrayed an insistent desire to find out about her life. The lady modestly replied that she had a lot to do, and showing genuine concern, asked a counter-question, wondering if the guard had put too much pressure on the prisoner and created unnecessary difficulties. With joy on his face, the boy replied that neither the guards nor Giacomo came to him, and this brought him great relief and a feeling of freedom. The guy listened in fascination to his companion's story about how she secretly tore out half the pages from an accounting book containing interest and burned them, easing her state of mind. The behavior of Giacomo, who spent all day beating around the bush, came as a real surprise to Blanche. He clutched jewelry and treasures in front of the Marquis's youngest son, as if he was looking for a way to attract his attention. Ricardo was about to say a few words, but when he noticed how his speech might be perceived, embarrassment took possession of him, and he, blushing, froze in silence. It turned out that the guy finally remembered why he came to the Count, after such a long time spent in thought and uncertainty. Quietly, with naive interest, the boy asked if the Giotto family had lost the war, hoping that perhaps they had managed to maintain their influence and dignity. The surprised lady watched with genuine interest as Ricardo, in deep self-condemnation, reproached himself for his inability to get money, placing full blame on himself for the situation. As a friend, the girl remembered the original story in which the guy went on a journey to repay a debt, which helped her better understand his motives and behavior. Ricardo considered himself a laughing stock for failing to repay his own family, which was perceived as a major failure and a huge shame for life. Turning away from the noblewoman, he felt deep shame and humiliation for not being able to get out of prison on his own, and this realization only increased his inner suffering and sense of helplessness. As soon as the guy suddenly stopped, the mafioso heard from the lady a decisive statement that he was absolutely wrong, and it sounded like a bolt from the blues. The lady hastened to reassure the interlocutor, gently assuring him that despite the current difficulties and failures in the end, he would still receive the money and would be able to cope with the situation, turning it to his advantage. Blanche sincerely dreamed of emptying the Count's treasury, leaving not a single jewel in it, and with the greatest satisfaction hitting Elio in the face with a bag of gold to express all her deep rage and disappointment. In addition, the good news was that if Juan was left without money, then the Marquise's family would also be left without finances, which could significantly change their situation and make adjustments to their current plans. The sweet girl herself will be able to literally bathe in gold coins, enjoying the luxury and prosperity that will now be available to her. The most important thing is that spring is about to come, and with its arrival, hidden dungeons will begin to appear in various corners of the earth, where ancient monasteries once lived, full of unknown secrets and forgotten mysteries. Blanche intended to turn the Giotto family into her army of assistants, who would help her in the battle against monsters, using their resources and powers to achieve her goal. After this, Anastasia would appear, who would turn in the bandits and receive recognition for her actions, strengthening her position and earning respect. Suddenly, tearing the aristocrat out of her fantasy world, the voice of Ricardo was heard, who asked with sincere interest whether the lady was cold. The man, noticing that his companion might have been cold, showed concern and offered her his blanket to provide her with warmth and comfort, demonstrating his attention and willingness to help. The incident embarrassed the guy so much that he blushed with shame and did not know what to do with himself, trying to hide his embarrassment and find a way out of the awkward situation. Smiling, Blanche took a bowl of soup from her inventory and offered it to the young man as food, demonstrating her willingness to take care of his comfort and satisfaction. While enjoying the taste of the food, Ricardo felt a cozy warmth begin to spread throughout his body, and this feeling of comfort and coziness that it brought gave him deep satisfaction and peace. Phoebe and Agate, two kind maids, sincerely and joyfully thanked their friend for her help in finding a new job, expressing deep gratitude for her support and care. Irene said that it was a small thing, thereby expressing her modest attitude towards the help, and emphasizing that for her it was not a significant problem. From a conversation with the maids, Blanche learned that Juan had given a copy of the keys to the treasury to his faithful assistant, which opened up new prospects for cunning plans and strategies. This news turned out to be very pleasant for the girl, as it made it easier to fulfill her plans, adding confidence in future plans and actions. At this time, Juan was indignant because he discovered that half of the accounting ledger was missing right before the wedding, which caused him deep dissatisfaction and concern, aggravating the current problems. Giacomo could not help but notice how suspicious the situation looked. His attention was drawn to the strange circumstances, which made him wary and doubtful. With a smirk, the evil man stated that perhaps it would be worthwhile to conduct a check on the new maid, Irene, hinting at possible problems or suspicions that might have arisen regarding her. Pierre, accompanied by a priest, has come to support Mariette ahead of tomorrow's wedding, trying to make sure that the noblewoman feels calm and confident before this important event in her life. The girl was clearly annoyed and extremely dissatisfied with what was happening, and next to her, as if immersed in her own thoughts, Blanche stood quietly and restrainedly, carefully observing the situation. When the guy, noticing her mood, cautiously asked if her younger sister was angry with him, the lady irritably replied that she was not, although her harsh tone and facial expressions clearly revealed hidden irritation and resentment. Turning around, the aristocrat restrainedly but firmly ordered the maid to immediately go and prepare tea, not tolerating any objections and expecting impeccable execution. The priest, standing nearby, turned his attention to Irene, a new servant who had recently started working in the mansion and seemed not yet quite accustomed to her role. Noticing the terrible burn marks on the girl's face, the kind man decided to offer his help to the poor girl, sympathetically realizing that she probably needed support and care. Smiling sweetly, a cute guy with long hair explained that he worked at a healing temple and specialized in healing wounds and burns, assuring that he could help in this situation. Blanche quickly and confidently replied that everything was fine, noting that the wounds had long since stopped causing pain, and she felt much better, so her condition did not require additional attention or intervention. However, the doctor turned out to be persistent, saying that if the maid was worried about money, then she shouldn't have to pay a penny at all, and offered help without any financial demands. Blanche began to realize that she was in a difficult position because if the treatment continued, the secret that she had hidden so carefully could be revealed. Suddenly, there was a loud cry from Mariette, who categorically stated that she did not want any healing and preferred to leave everything as it was. The Virgin strictly stated that if the maid agreed to treatment, she would immediately be expelled from her native mansion forever, without any proceedings or any regrets. For the first time, the girl felt relief from her sister's hostile nature, since it was this unpleasant aspect that helped keep a big secret, preventing it from being revealed. The man in the room asked the aristocrat to refrain from harsh words towards the poor maid, and to think carefully about her decision again before making a final decision. Mariette herself explained that against the backdrop of the ugly servants, the charming noblewoman looked much more beautiful, emphasizing the contrast between their appearances. After this, the lady, with difficulty holding back tears, added that beauty is the only thing she has left, and that it is now the last consolation and source of self-esteem preserved despite all the experiences. Screaming, Mariette desperately said that she had to look as beautiful as possible at the wedding, emphasizing that this was the only way to show her true worth on this special day. The cup was broken with a deafening crash. The shards flew in all directions, creating a mess on the floor and attracting the attention of everyone in the room. Turning away with an expression of determination on her face, the noblewoman confidently walked towards the exit. The steps sounded confident and firm, as if she had already decided to leave this place and did not intend to return. The priest strongly warned the gentleman not to even think about following his lady for the sake of his own well-being and safety, advising him to stay where he was and not to interfere with what was happening. The aristocrat apologizing to Irene for the behavior of his sister, who was very worried before the important ceremony, expressed regret for the inconvenience and promised that in the future, everything will be done to improve the situation. The servants bent down to begin picking up the sharp pieces scattered across the floor, carefully picking up each piece and trying not to miss a single one in order to restore order to the large room. But at this moment, Blanche suddenly cut herself, and blood flowed from her finger, dripping onto the floor and drawing attention to her accident amid the bustle and debris everywhere. The compassionate priest wasted no time in rushing to the maid, offering his assistance in providing first aid and treating the wound, trying to ease her suffering and stop the bleeding. Their hands met in a gentle touch, from which a bright light flashed, illuminating the space around and filling it with a special magical radiance. The maid quickly withdrew her hand, looking in fear at the source of the bright light, which suddenly and dazzlingly flashed upon their contact. Fear was reflected in the eyes, and the heart beat faster from surprise and anxiety. When the man began to reveal the secret about Blanche, the lady, not wanting this information to reach the aristocrat, immediately intervened to prevent the truth from being revealed. However, the doctor could not resist and still pronounced the true name of the maiden, causing shock. This changed the perception of the situation and called into question everything that the guys knew before. Pierre carefully informed his friend that he had apparently accidentally mentioned the name of the deceased. In conversation, this name sounded so unexpected and significant that there was a suspicion that it might change their understanding of current events. The healer himself began to tell the boy that during the healing, he had a unique ability to see the true personality of the patient through their outer masks and deceptive facades. The man confessed to his master that the servant's aura was identical to that of the deceased Blanche. This astonishing coincidence led him to believe that there might be a connection between them. Suddenly, the Marquis entered the room, demanding that the doctor immediately repeat everything he had said earlier. The voice sounded stern, emphasizing the importance and urgency of repeating the information. The aristocrat was not ready to accept the shocking and incredible truth that his daughter, whom he considered dead and mourned for her, was actually alive and was among them, which completely turned the idea of reality upside down. Blanche's plans were not to return back to his family. All the lady really wanted was to take Ricardo from prison and rob the treasury to ensure financial independence and power for herself and her allies. The castle was large and majestic, awe-inspiring, with its grandiose architecture and majestic towers that seemed to touch the heavens. Mariette moved forward with rapid steps along the stone corridor. The steps echoed in the silence, and the gaze focused forward, looking for a way out of the dark labyrinth. Suddenly, the beautiful girl stopped when she heard rumors that Irene was supposedly a spy. Events that had previously seemed insignificant took on new meaning. Without wasting time to think, Mariette quickly and deftly hid behind a column, trying to remain unnoticed in order to eavesdrop on someone else's conversation with genuine interest and find out all the subtleties and details of what was happening. It turned out that Count Juan and his subordinate were exchanging secrets in the dark and shadowed corners of the mansion, where their conversations were hidden from prying eyes. Giacomo told the owner that the maid who had recently arrived at the mansion came from a city known for its gangs and mafia, and this raised serious doubts in him. Guy carefully removed the mask that Irene used to completely hide your face and thereby ensure absolute anonymity, protecting your identity from unwanted views and possible discovery. In amazement, the beautiful Mariette watched as the mysterious country of the maid with the scar opened up, and as Giacomo handed over to the Count a fabric that seemed to carry special meaning and hidden secrets. The terrible truth finally began to dawn on the girl, gradually revealing itself to her like darkness, plunging her into terrible realizations and unknown depths of fear. It turned out that the maid whom everyone thought was dead and long buried was in fact Blanche, and this discovery shocked everyone who believed in the sad loss. Clutching the evidence in his hand, Juan instantly realized that this was the work of the evil mafioso Elio, whose cunning manipulations have now become obvious thanks to the evidence found. The aristocrat immediately demanded that Giacomo immediately find out where Riccardo was currently located in order to find out about his whereabouts and take the necessary actions. The guy agreed that he would immediately check whether the boy was in prison and take the necessary measures to clarify that location and condition. Suddenly, there was a loud cry sounding like a call, which persistently repeated the name Giacomo, attracting attention and forcing one to immediately turn his gaze to it. It turned out that it was Mariette, who with a mysterious smile and a confident gait walked towards the men, as if she had her own plan and determination, leaving no doubt about her goal. The lady intervened in someone else's conversation concerning Irene, attracting attention with her sudden appearance and expressive participation in the discussion, which immediately changed its course. Mariette began to defend the ugly servant, claiming that she had worked in their mansion since childhood when the noblewoman was still a child, and therefore deserves trust and respect. The girl explained that the lady's face became so stern and distorted due to the consequences of a fire in the kitchen, which left deep scars and marks on her appearance. The boys realized that they were wrong in their suspicions about the maid, realizing that their conclusions were incorrect, and that she had nothing to do with the problems that arose. Giacomo quietly whispered in the gentleman's ear that it seemed he was wrong in expressing his doubts and awareness of the error in their previous suspicions. Mariette was lost in thought about the arrival of her younger sister, imagining how her appearance would change the current situation and how it would affect her own plans and feelings. Smiling, the lady noted how remarkably similar their faces were, emphasizing the family resemblance and expressing satisfaction at this remarkable coincidence. And the lady noticed how easy it was to substitute Blanche instead of Mariette at the wedding so that she would get married and spend her wedding night with the Count, leaving no suspicion and ensuring the successful completion of the plan. Putting her hand to her stomach, the lady realized that in this case, the secret could be kept by hiding it from prying eyes and ensuring complete confidentiality. At this time, Blanche learned the secret that her older sister had been pregnant for some time, and this unexpected information shocked her, revealing new and unexpected circumstances to her. The man told the lady that the third prince had refused to acknowledge his child and accept Mariette into the royal family, which was a significant blow to their plans and caused great concern. The conversation between people was interrupted by the eldest daughter of the Marquise, who warmly greeted her father and thereby returned the attention of everyone present to the important event. Walking past them, the aristocrat ordered everyone to leave the room immediately so that she could prepare for the upcoming ceremony. After that, Mariette added that everyone left the room except Irene. Blanche, without uttering a word, obediently obeyed the order of her older sister, feeling how the weight of the word fell on her fragile shoulders, but she did not dare to object. The lady dressed as a maid was absorbed in thoughts of finding both keys to the treasury and did not care at all about her own family. Blanche made the final decision to wait patiently until Mariette fell into a deep sleep, knowing that only then would the ideal moment come for her planned plan. Unexpectedly, the beautiful beauty quickly and decisively tore off the disguise from her colleague's face, exposing her true identity and jeopardizing her carefully hidden secret. This unexpected action caused deep dissatisfaction, and Blanche irritation grew inside her because a carefully thought-out plan had been violated, and now it was necessary to act differently. With a slight and slightly mocking grin, Mariette greeted her little sister, her eyes sparkling with warmth that hid something more that remained unclear. The maid, without thinking twice, turned away, trying to avoid the unpleasant company of her relative as quickly as possible, feeling a growing desire to leave this place. The noblewoman gave the order to Blanche to stop where she was. Her voice was firm and decisive, clearly emphasizing the importance of this instruction. The little girl stopped, but did not miss the opportunity to warn that Mariette had no right to give orders, left and right. This tone was full of confidence and slight irritation. The upset aristocrat stated with obvious regret that she had in fact saved her sister from exposure since Giacomo suspected Irene, and this certainly required special attention. This came as a shock to the beauty, as the man was not supposed to know about Blanche's hidden true identity, which ruined all the carefully laid plans. Mariette asked her beloved sister not to worry, as the duo had already covered her, providing the necessary protection and support in the current situation. With bewilderment and confusion, the lady asked why she was given help, not understanding the true motives and reasons for such unexpected nobility. It turned out that the aristocrat had a request, and in exchange for her help, the rich woman was ready to provide a service, having previously established the terms of cooperation. Mariette said it would not demand anything from Blanche without offering any form of compensation or reward, in return emphasizing its commitment to honesty in relationships. With a slight grin, the beauty declared that she knew where the key to the treasury was. These words were full of confidence and mysterious charm. Smiling evilly, the lady added that if her sister fulfilled her request, she would happily tell where the necessary thing was, hinting at her desire to manipulate the situation. Blanche clarified whether the relative is really satisfied with the situation in which Irene takes all the treasures for herself. To this, Mariette just shrugged her shoulders indifferently, without expressing the slightest interest or concern. Crooked in disgust, the girl added that she was ready to agree to anything rather than spend the night with a dirty and disgusting creature like Juan. Turning away from her sister, Blanche agreed to the deal, seeking to benefit from the proposed exchange and take advantage of the situation to her advantage. To herself, the maiden was already thinking about how in the future Mariette would regret her choice related to her sister, sensing that the consequences might turn out to be far from what she expected. The dungeon was built from durable stone, which gave it impressive durability and reliability, creating a feeling of impenetrability and permanence. Ricardro sat on the bed in prison, feeling the gravity of his situation, and looking at the gray walls, which seemed especially oppressive at this moment. A happy smile appeared on the guy's face when he saw the guest, and joy sparkled in his eyes, reflecting sincere enthusiasm and a warm greeting to the newcomer. The guest was Blanche, elegantly dressed in a snow-white dress with lace ruffles and exquisite jewelry that gave her an impeccably sophisticated and captivating look. Like the faithful dog of a mafioso who diligently and relentlessly complimented his companion, Blanche noted that Ricardo's health has improved significantly and his stress level has decreased significantly. The little girl with tender care handed the guy a small bag of money. Ricardo must be the first to leave this terrible place. The guy, trembling with horror and excitement, asked with tension whether Blanche was going to leave everything behind and go with him in search of the long-awaited freedom which promised deliverance from endless fear. The beautiful girl refused, justifying herself by saying that she still had urgent matters in this house that required her urgent attention and solution. Turning away, the girl said with obvious condemnation that it was precisely such reasons that forced the guy to be the first to return to his hometown, leaving Blanche here with urgent matters. Suddenly, Ricardo stopped the beauty, looking at her with charm. He invited her to go together, hoping to spend time in the company and make this moment special. With tears in his eyes, the boy added that no matter what Blanche did, he was ready to support her in any situation, expressing his unconditional devotion and willingness to be there no matter the circumstances. In a cold and merciless tone, the aristocrat ordered the boy to pull himself together. The words, imbued with stern nobility, sounded like an inexorable command calling for self-control and courage. The son of the mafia boss immediately flinched in surprise and immediately fell silent, feeling the pressure and tension of the situation, which left him no opportunity to continue the conversation. Blanche explained her decision by saying that Ricardo could become a serious liability, interfering with carefully laid plans and creating additional complications that could complicate the achievement of her goals. With his head down, the boy felt deeply irritated and uneasy that someone considered him a nuisance and a loser, which hurt his self-esteem and caused a feeling of bitterness and insecurity. The boy, sobbing, asked if he had met the lovely lady again, his voice trembling with excitement and regret, and he waited impatiently for an answer, hoping for a miracle or confirmation of his feelings. Blanche, wanting to somehow console her companion, gently hugged Ricardo. The feminine touch was full of warmth and care, trying to bring at least a little consolation and peace to a confused state. The couple agreed to meet again, exchanging promises. The sweet girl added that she will always be there, ready to support and be a support regardless of the circumstances. Looking at the crying and embarrassed interlocutor, the aristocrat thought to herself about how she could profitably use the mafia in the future, carefully planning how to make the most of this situation. The lantern burned with all its might, illuminating the space with dim light, since this was the last time that the trembling light made its way through the darkness, foreshadowing the imminent onset of complete darkness. The wedding hall was exquisitely decorated with white sheets and furniture adorned with fresh flowers. Every detail was carefully selected to create an atmosphere of elegance and solemnity, emphasizing the importance of the event. The red hair was neatly secured with black clips, which contrasted with the bright shade, creating a striking and stylish look. Mariette mercilessly cut her locks with scissors. Every movement was full of determination, as if she was trying to get rid of something superfluous and unnecessary. Now, the elder sister played the role of a maid, braiding the wig on the younger sister's head, with special attention and care, trying to create the perfect look for her. Around her neck was an exquisite pearl chain, inlaid with deep precious stones that sparkled and shimmered in the light. The lady was ready to become the bride of a rich count, looking forward to the upcoming union, which promised her not only material well-being, but also social status, opening up new horizons and opportunities. Mariette stood nearby in the role of maid as she and the lady switched roles, which brought an unexpected element to the situation and allowed her to take part in the new duties. The Marquise entered the team, asking if the daughter was ready for the wedding, wondering how she felt about the upcoming event, and whether she was ready for the important changes it would bring. Turning her face to the aristocrat, the noblewoman confidently replied that she was completely ready for the upcoming wedding. The words were full of determination and confidence, reflecting readiness for an important step in life. Fragile, like the finest porcelain, the daughter's hand softly and tenderly lay on the man's strong, confident hand, as if seeking support and protection in it. The father, holding back his excitement and filled with pride, carefully escorted his dear relative to the altar, where her future husband was eagerly awaiting her, ready to throw in his lot with her. The guests clapped their hands with joy and delight, congratulating the happy newlyweds, and sincerely shared with them their warmth and good wishes for the future. Mariette was pleased that her naive sister so easily agreed to spend her wedding night with this grumpy old man, whom no one had liked for a long time. The aristocrat was sincerely perplexed how anyone could seriously believe that she had knowledge of the location of the key to the treasury, where all the wealth and family secrets passed down from generation to generation were kept. Suddenly, Mr. Giacomo entered the room, and his unexpected appearance frightened Mariette so much that she involuntarily stepped back, feeling her heart beat faster with anxiety. The man rudely stated that he needed to make sure that the maid was not a spy, and the harsh tone made it clear that he was not going to let the matter slide. Giacomo extended his hand to the maid's face. The gesture was full of threat and tension, as if he was about to scrutinize every detail of her expression and intentions. With a sharp movement of his hand, Giacomo tore off the mask from the lady's face, and thereby became convinced that the servant had been deceiving everyone all this time, hiding her true identity and intentions. With a grin, the gentleman called the girl an idiot sent by Elio, clearly expressing contempt and not hiding his satisfaction from exposing the deception. However, Giacomo's grin turned into shock when he learned that under the maid's mask was Mariette, who at that time was supposed to walk down the aisle to the count, which completely changed the situation. Covered in sweat, Giacomo, trying to understand the current situation, asked in alarm who then was currently with the rich aristocrat instead of the expected lady. Juan and Blanche stood side by side, their hands clasped and their gazes full of tenderness, as the priest spoke solemn words linking their destinies and symbolizing the beginning of their common path in life. The girl mentally thought about how easy it would be to take the key from the count when they were alone, and how a cunning plan could be carried out at the moment of their solitude. Blanche immediately realized that Mariette had lied, since the system had already notified her of the discrepancy in the information, which confirmed all suspicions. However, the little girl was confident in her abilities and believed that she could easily take the key from the vile nobleman, despite all the difficulties that might arise. With a joyful smile, Juan carefully lifted the veil of the beautiful bride, enjoying the moment when the gentle face appeared before him, again, full of great happiness and excitement. The Marquis with long red hair was watching them. His gaze was full of interest and hidden emotions. He carefully followed what was happening on Blanche's face, as she imagined how her relatives would react when they learned that they were left penniless, and how their faces expressed shock and disappointment. In the crowd stood a man with a lantern on his belt, which suddenly went out, having exhausted all its fuel, and now the dim light that once illuminated the surroundings left only darkness and obscurity. He watched Blanche intently in the arms of the scoundrel, and this moment, filled with contradictions, caused him deep inner irritation and a feeling of discontent. Ricardo couldn't believe what was happening. His mind refused to accept the reality of the events that were unfolding before him, and he was shocked by the unexpectedness and scale of everything that was happening, which made him feel completely lost. From the very beginning, the boy carefully watched the newlywed couple and the priest standing nearby. His curious gaze did not miss a single moment of their ceremony, absorbed in every detail from soft whispers to solemn words. Giacomo, shocked by what he saw, noticed Ricardo, who in his opinion should have been rotting in prison, and this unexpected appearance caused him deep confusion and anxiety. 6 hours ago, at midnight, a horse galloped in the dark, its large hooves thundering along the pavement, leaving behind only an echo in the silence of the night. The boy obeyed his mentor's orders and rode his horse to safety, carefully following the instructions to ensure his safety and complete the task. A few hours later, morning came, and the guy, breathing heavily and having difficulty regaining his breath, finally found time to rest, feeling the fatigue from prolonged stress and effort gradually receding. In freedom, he could finally feel alive, experience the fullness of life and freedom which had previously seemed unattainable under conditions of constant stress and restrictions. Suddenly, the son of the mafia boss noticed a wizard standing in the square and singing a song about a beautiful maiden whose portrait was displayed on a banner and who was going to get married soon, which attracted attention and aroused curiosity. Ricardo, looking at the portrait with deep surprise, recognized in the image his savior Blanche, whose face was so familiar and significant to him. Having changed into a classic suit, the guy was surprised to realize how he knew the girl in the picture, and was amazed at how suddenly all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, revealing long-forgotten memories to him. A smart magician with long blonde hair said that apparently the boy was from distant lands and did not know about the girl depicted in the picture, who was the beauty of the continent. With a smile, he shared with Ricardo the news of Lady Mariette's imminent marriage to a wealthy count, which apparently would happen in the near future. Without wasting time to think, the guy quickly headed towards the horse, deftly jumped into the saddle, and full of determination rushed back to the castle, trying to return as quickly as possible and sort out the situation. With a sly grin, Juan told the guests that he now intended to go to his chambers to retire with the most beautiful lady in the whole country, relax and enjoy company. Ricardo, watching the cute couple from the side, could not understand how Blanche could fall in love with this elderly man, and was immersed in thoughts about what could attract her to him and force her to choose just such a scoundrel. The guy could not understand whether this choice was solely the result of Lady Blanche's decision, or whether someone else had pressured her into making such a decision, leaving him in the dark about her true motives. Tears appeared in the eyes of the future villain when he realized that his beloved had chosen another man, and this deep realization caused him great grief and disappointment. Suddenly, the mafioso's hand was grabbed by another guy's hand, interrupting his sad thoughts and forcing him to pay attention to the unexpected turn of events. Hearing the familiar voice of his tormentor, Ricardo felt a cold sweat run all over his body, and fear like an icy wave gripped him again, making him tremble in horror. It was Giacomo who asked the boy with persistent interest what he did outside his prison, carefully observing the reaction and trying to understand the reasons for the escape. A terrible image of a sadist who once caused him considerable pain instantly arose in his memory, and this memory again caused deep fear and anxiety in his soul, exacerbating all the internal tension. Ricardo understood that he should have run immediately, but his legs seemed to be numb with fear and refused to obey, not allowing him to take a single step. The guy's stress increased sharply, and his internal state became so tense that the boy felt panic cover him completely. Seeing the lantern hanging on his interlocutor's belt, Giacomo reluctantly reached for it, mockingly, calling this item garbage and demonstrating his contempt and disdain for it. A memory immediately arose in the guy's head of how Blanche gave him this jewel, and this memory brought a bitter feeling of loss and regret. Pushing Giacomo away, the boy firmly ordered him not to touch the lantern. Determination and fear mixed with anxiety for the precious gift sounded in the man's voice. Moreover, he stepped on the foot of his former tormentor, thereby hoping to cause him pain, and tried to escape from the situation, trying to provide himself with at least a little time to escape. From sharp pain, Giacomo fell to his knees. His face was distorted with fear and anger, and he began to angrily shout offensive words at his interlocutor, not restraining his ardent discontent and resentment. Ricardo fled. All his thoughts were focused on one goal: to find Blanche as quickly as possible. The mafioso ignored all the obstacles in his path and did not notice the world around him, striving towards his goal with determination. Giacomo, without wasting a second, quickly rushed after the fugitive, determined not to lose sight of him and to catch up with him as soon as possible, despite all the obstacles and difficulties along the way. The man was very close to the guy. Heavy breathing was felt on the fugitive's back, and every second passed in tense silence, full of anxious anticipation, as if the atmosphere itself was permeated with a sense of imminent danger. Suddenly, with incredible strength and determination, a strong hand grabbed Ricardo by the shoulder, as if foreshadowing an approaching storm and leaving no chance of salvation. The boy fell to the ground, and his tormentor, not expecting such a turn of events, found himself crushed against him. At this time, the lantern, falling off its bracket, fell to the floor and broke into thousands of fragments, creating a bright and disturbing sight. Ricardo was deeply upset when he saw how the gift from Blanche, which he valued so much, was broken and broken, which caused him quite a blow. As if possessed, Giacomo admired the expression of horror on the face of the captive, not missing the opportunity to call him after his father, whose name was Ilio Giotto. Rejoicing, the rapist said with satisfaction that this expression on the captive's face perfectly suited the situation and only emphasized the gross humiliation. With tears rolling down his cheeks, Ricardo, trembling with pain and despair, begged for forgiveness. The voice was full of fear and hope when he seriously asked to let him go, dreaming of the opportunity to see the light again and find freedom. The man just liked it. Hearing the requests and pleas of the prisoner gave him special pleasure. Every cry for help and tears only intensified the perverted pleasure. But suddenly, unexpectedly, and without any warning, Giacomo lost consciousness, and as if under the influence of an invisible force, collapsed right on the guy's shoulder, stood behind her, her gaze icy and impassive as she mercilessly knocked out the tormentor, like a furious frosty wind, sweeping away everything in its path. Ricardo, breathing heavily and having difficulty controlling his pulse, did not take his admiring gaze off his savior, as if every gesture was a source of incredible relief and hope. Placing a finger to her lips, Blanche ordered Giacomo not to make any noise in the middle of the night. Her gaze was full of imperious severity and confidence, as if she expected absolute silence. The Count's subordinate could not get up from his seat. His body was trembling with weakness, and a cough accompanied by blood escaped from him, like the last breath before inevitable death. The aristocrat himself was sincerely happy to see Blanche. Her presence filled the guy's face with joy, as if he had met an old friend or was receiving long-awaited relief. The lady was extremely unhappy with the boy's return, and was thinking about how to punish the stupid son of a mafioso who could not follow simple instructions. The irritated aristocrat began to lightly hit the boy on the back, and the actions were full of hidden contempt and displeasure. Every light touch expressed her deep resentment at his behavior. Feeling her anger, dear Ricardo began to beg for forgiveness, and the words flowed like a stream filled with sincere repentance and the desire to correct the mistake in front of the lady. Having calmed down, Blanche, with sincere concern, asked how the interlocutor was feeling. In the woman's voice, there was real tenderness and a desire to understand his condition after what happened, as if she was trying to relieve him of the severity of what he had experienced. The embarrassed mafioso replied that he felt fine, trying to hide the internal tension behind external calm, although the tone of his voice betrayed nervousness and anxiety. After making sure that everything was fine with the guy, Blanche returned to Giacomo to punish the offender. Her determination was unshakable, and she intended to achieve justice for the insults and disruption caused. Ricardo trembled with fear as he watched the cruelty with which the little lady punished her tormentor. Bloody splashes scattered, emphasizing the unrelenting rage. The baby stopped the moment she realized that Giacomo was in a deep blackout, lying motionless, as if lulled by the peace of the night. Ricardo, trembling with excitement and fear, asked with deep confusion what exactly the lady was doing with this man, and for what reason she beat him so severely, leaving many questions and bewilderments. It turned out that the reason for such cruel behavior on the part of Blanche was that she was unsuccessfully searching for the key to the treasury, and her disappointment and despair were expressed in this violence. The aristocrat presented the key decorated with a red gem, and stated that it should look exactly like that in order to meet expectations. Wanting to be helpful, Ricardo loudly declared that he was ready to assist in finding the necessary item, hoping in this way to make his contribution to resolving the situation. The mafioso began a meticulous examination of the tormentor's clothes, hoping with all her might to find a clue that could become a key element in unraveling the whole situation and shed light on complex and confusing aspects. Soon, Ricardo, carefully examining every corner, found the long-awaited thing which caused a sharp reaction from Giacomo. He shuddered with surprise and excitement. With the last of his strength, the man opened his eyes, and looking at the boy, hardly pronounced the name Elio, hoping in this way to cause him pain and leave an indelible mark on his fragile soul. This caused a storm of anger in Ricardo, who, gritting his teeth,